ground where the biocrust is undisturbed, and lack of fuel content. In the second photo, we see an area that was burned, and the sage was removed, but they're still healthy bunch communities. Annual grass is not present, but sage in these burned areas can take decades to recover. And the third photo shows a sagebrush community with a high percent of annual grass. There's no longer bare patches of soil in between those shrubs. And the amount of fine fuels present will lead to high intensity wildfire, which will remove the existing sage community when it occurs. The last photo is of an area that's burned and invaded invasive annual grasses. There's no visible sagebrush. There's few bunch grasses. And annual grass dominated system is poor quality habitat for wildlife. It also sequesters little carbon. It has poor soil moisture retention and very poor fire and drought resilience. So this cycle of climate-induced invasion, increased fire, and exclusion of these native forage species can drive plant communities into the annual grass-dominated system. So ODFW regional habitat biologists, farm bill and working lands biologists, district wildlife biologists, and wildlife area managers spend considerable time and resources addressing this issue with the goal of maintaining the grasses and forbs, shrubs that provide forage for wildlife and co-benefits of livestock forage and carbon sequestration. I'm going to pass the presentation to Ryan.
Chair Wall, Vice Commissioners, and Director Colbert. I'm Ryan Torland. I'm the wildlife biologist working for Fish and Wildlife based out of John Day. So the mule deer plan identifies as a major driver of mule deer populations. This will say that winter range is essential. Many critical life history needs are met during the winter. Adequate winter forage conditions increase fawn survival and contributes to population growth. The plan also identifies annual grass as a major limiting factor for mule deer. There is significant overlap between mule deer winter range and annual grass invasion. One of the primary strategies outlined is widespread chemical treatment to reduce annual grass cover. The ultimate goal is to reduce annual grass and restore sage steppe habitat that make it more resilient to fire and drought and provide long-term benefits to mule deer and other wildlife species. This map, just want to bring this to attention, is a central part of eastern Oregon and the John Island. The area outlined in blue is mule deer winter range, and there in black is the back of the Philip Schneider Wildlife Area. This will be the focus of the rest of the presentation to give you an idea where we're at. This represents the Aldrich herd range population recently. As you can see, like many areas in Eastern Oregon, this population has been on a downward decline over the past decade and even longer. The driving population and winter range degradation is just one of the many factors that is bringing that down. There's significant overlap between mule deer winter range and annual grass. In part, that's geography, but also these are where the critters have to winter. The top image shows an annual grass with the John Day Valley winter range. Darker areas indicate high percentage of cover of annual grass. This is remote sense imaging and repeatedly used during the rest of the presentation, but the red color, the higher the percent cover of annual grass. So it gives you an indication of what we're looking at. The bottom image shows mule deer and where they're observed during the winter counts. As you can see, all those dots are where we are near. That's where they overlap with the annual grass, how much that works. So I want to bring a couple case studies. So one was some very promising results. The areas marked in red were treated by the Grant County Conservation District, and it actually treated about 120,000 acres within Grant County with a herbicide called Rejuvra. There's various fundings, Senate Bill 762, ODFW, other sources, as well as $1 million that were contributed by private owners. I want to highlight an example for John Day Valley yellow circle. In 2020, the site in the bottom left had over 60% annual grass cover. In the area in 2021 was treated, the red area. And in 2024, you can still kind of see a few of those little red gaps where they didn't treat, but the cover went down to about 10%. So this is reviewers are very promising residual effect, but at this point we don't know how long this will last over time, how long it will take for annual grass to recover. The second case study is in Creek Basin. There's a lot going on with this. We'll tease that out. Let's see if this actually works. It does. Okay. And is the need that we may need to retreat to maintain these habitats. The site in the upper left there had 40% annual grass cover in 2011. In 2014, this area burned. So this is a big 70,000 acre fire in Phillips Schneider Wildlife Area. And in 2015, the slide on the right, we treated with plateau and did a bunch of reseeding, and the cover reduced down to about 11%. So that annual grass did go down. However, annual grass started to recover and started to come back up by 2018. Annual grass was recovering again, and so we retreated in 2019 and continued to monitor the effects. However, by 2024, the bottom right, we're already back to over 30% cover, and annual grass is dominating the site. We've learned that the treatment areas consistently had lower annual grass cover than compared to untreated areas. However, this shows that without treatment, the other sites would be completely dominated by annual grass. This kind of conversion leads to an annual grass savanna that is nearly completely lost to shrubs and eliminates the winter forests that mule deer depend on. Retreatment is essential to recover these sites and make them beneficial for mule deer and other wildlife species. What this gets into is a treatment cycle. Restoration is never a one and done project. To be effective, sometimes the area needs to be treated, seeded, retreated, and continuously monitored. And it gets us into a cycle of this. With an end goal of having a healthy perennial plant community that will be more fire resilient and support greater biodiversity. And next, we're going to go to Phillips Schneider Wildlife Area as another case study of what we're working on here.
Morning. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Commissioners, and Director Colbert. I'm Dan Summers. I'm the Wildlife Area Manager for wildlife areas within the John Day Basin. John Day Watershed, sorry. And today I'm mainly going to be talking about Phillips Schneider Wildlife Area. The wildlife area is located in the central part of the state, approximately 30 miles west of John Day. Acquisition of the wildlife area began in 1972 with the purpose to protect and enhance winter range habitat for mule deer. Recent GPS data has highlighted this area as an important migratory corridor for the Aldridge mule deer herd range and provides habitat for pronghorn, bighorn sheep, elk, and federally listed semi-wild species. The wildlife area consists of about 52,000 acres, roughly half BLM owned and half ODFW owned, and surrounded by Malheur and Ochiko National Forest. Habitat restoration actions include seasonal road closures, public access for wintering big game, juniper removal, forest thinning, invasive annual grass treatment, reseeding, and plantings. And if you focus on the map on the right, the blue areas are the state-owned land and the tan being BLM owned. But the entire outlined area is managed by ODFW. Here's a boundary map of Phillips W. Schneider Wildlife Area highlighting recent large fires in 2014 and 2024. In 2014, we had the South Fork Complex Fire, which was about 66,000 acres, shown here in orange, and the 2024 Rail Ridge Fire, which was about 176,000 acres, shown in red. In response to these fires, the increasing spread of annual grass at lower elevations, ODFW and partners have completed over 9,000 acres of herbicide treatments targeting invasive annual grasses, shown here in yellow. We prioritize these areas for treatment based on risk of invasion by annual grasses and relative importance of the area for mule deer, ownership, and accessibility by equipment. Other habitat restoration activities not shown in this figure include 3,000 acres of seeding, 2,000 acres of juniper removal, and about 400 acres of thinning. This work would not be possible without help from partners included but not limited to local soil water conservation districts, watershed councils, tribes, state and federal grants, and other state agencies and volunteer groups. I'd like to focus on a treatment site in Murders Creek Basin, circled on the left. This map you already seen once from Ryan's talk, but it's a heat map. The red areas represent a higher density and invasive annual grass, and the lighter areas show a less dense area of invasive annual grass. This area was affected by the 2014 fire, but then was immediately treated that fall with herbicide, and then reseeded the year after in 2015, and then received a follow-up herbicide treatment in 2019. Due to the repeated herbicide treatments and reseeding between 2014 and 2019, there's a presence of perennial grasses and less annual grass in the surrounding landscape. During the 2024 Rail Ridge fire, since there's a larger presence of perennial grasses, which retain moisture later into the season, the fire wasn't able to carry through the unit and instead went around. The picture on the right was taken right after the Rail Ridge fire in 2024. So as you can see, the fire just skirted all the way around the area and didn't even touch the area inside the treated area. Immediately after the 2024 fire, the area was treated with the new herbicide Rejuva. So here's some pictures of that same unit taken this year, July 2025. The bright shades of yellow you can see in the photo on the left indicate infestation of invasive annual grasses. The darker area inside the circle indicates more plant and soil moisture is the treatment site, and that's in that picture on the left. The picture on the right is from inside the encircled area. Currently present, there are healthy bunch grasses, forbs, and little to no annual grasses. The next step for this site would include continued monitoring, reseeding to increase plant diversity, and future herbicide treatments when necessary. So how do we effectively combat invasive annual grasses when they're impacting millions of acres of habitat in Oregon? This begins with defending core habitats. We prioritize treatment sites with existing bunch grass communities, particularly with important wildlife habitats. We use GIS tools as state map to identify areas that we can target for monitoring and treatment. You also completes annual vegetation surveys within wildlife areas to ground truth these eco-state maps and gather more information from the ground. Maintaining these habitats requires early detection of invasive species and rapid response. The approach emphasizes prevention, risk assessment, and rapid response to prevent invasive annual grass from becoming fully established. Responses vary, but herbicides, seeding, and prescribed fire are all available tools. Treating landscape scale partnerships, and ODFW is partnering across the state with natural resource conservation services, local soil water conservation districts, watershed councils, and trusts, federal land management agencies, and private landowners. So some takeaway messages that we'd like you to really think about. So we need to prioritize treatments in core habitats, have early detection and rapid responses. There's a significant overlap of mule deer winter range and invasive annual grass invasion, and we are seeing decreasing mule deer populations in these areas. We need to have monetary resources available immediately after fire in order to decrease the cost of restoration and increase the chance of success. Funding for this work comes from a variety of sources. The more traditional sources include federal and state grants, but recently ODFW John Day Watershed has received a grant through the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and America the Beautiful to treat up to 2,000 acres for invasive annual grasses within mule deer and winter range, which will be occurring this fall. In fact, starting right Monday. This is also partnered, ODFW has also partnered with Grant Soil Water Conservation District over the past several years to complete thousands of acres of herbicide treatment on state-owned land and privately owned land. In addition, ODFW was a recipient for more than $3 million in the Oregon Natural Working Lands Funds in 2023 for several projects around the state, one of which was designed to address invasive annual grass and restore deep-rooted perennial bunch grasses for approximately 5,000 acres of rangeland in Wasco County. And another thing that I'd like to add to this is we're continuing our partnership with BLM. As you can see, like a big part of the map was ODFW and BLM owned, trying to get it to where we can partner with them to put our resources to work on their land will be a huge benefit. And then I'd like to thank you for giving us a chance to talk to you today. Come on now. Anyway, there's a question slide there. We'd like to give you just thank you for letting us talk today. And at this time, we can take any questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Levert.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, great presentation, guys. Very, very interesting. I have three questions. The first one on the Schneider, was BLM able to provide any funding for that?
So they don't provide funding to us directly, but they are doing their part as applying a bunch of herbicide this year. They have more restrictions as far as we do, as far as what they can apply due to NEPA and all that. But I believe they're going to be treating plateau this year, and then they also have some funding to do some seeding possibly next year.
Okay.
So, but you'll see on the maps when it's like, there's really sharp outlines of where there's really good treatment sites and then not such good treatment sites. The treatment sites that we're able to, have more success on is typically the state-owned land, and then right next to it is BLM, which is sad. I mean, they are doing work, but they're just a little more restricted.
Okay, I'm assuming this is aerial treated.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What you have I know it varies probably, but what's the average cost per acre for treating with plateau and Chinook?
It really varies. So if we use plateau, it could be as cheap as $50 an acre, depending on the pilot you get and all that kind of stuff. If using Rejuver, it's up closer to about $80 an acre.
Okay. Question for you, Ryan. So it looks like we need to retreat every 5 years or so, roughly. Is that correct on the one you were showing?
Correct. So with that, we were treating with plateau on Schneider. That was an example of plateau, and it has effectiveness at 2 or 3 years. And then you're looking at probably some sort of retreatment depending on how things come back. Rejuvera, that's kind of why I left that side a little bit open. It's a relatively new chemical. It has a longer residual, 5 to 7, depending on the site. And we're kind of yet to see what the retreatment cycle is going to look like on that yet.
Okay. And last, just a comment, compliment you all for the studies, shows that it works. It's disappointing that we've got to keep at it. I call it relentless engagement, but we've got to keep going on it. So yeah, this is really good information, and the Mule Deer are going to thank you for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dallas DeFries, and then Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde.
Yeah, thank you. My one question you kind of just answered, Ryan, is I was going to have you kind of describe the difference between Rejuver and plateau and how that is currently changing. Another question that I had, as far as reseeding some of these areas, are you reseeding them all with native grasses? Are you targeting some areas with, crested weed and other forage species?
I can take that. It sort of depends on the site. We tend to actually use what we call beneficial non-natives. Things like intermediate wheat, Siberian crested wheat, things that compete well with annual grass, with the goal of really breaking that annual cycle and getting into a perennial cycle. Once you've kind of got there, you can kind of worry more then about getting your native, bunch grasses in, blue bunch wheat, Idaho fescue, that sort of thing. Also a cost thing, we can get these grasses much cheaper than if you're buying, blue bunch wheatgrass at $30, $40 a pound. It makes seeding, it doesn't go as far. So it just depends on the site. And just to kind of a little bit more on the Rejuver, kind of answering your question, the Rejuver and plateau do work similar. They're just a different type of chemical where they're a pre-emergent, so they prevent the annual grass from coming up, and that's essentially how they work.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, you guys, thanks for the presentation. More statements than questions, I think. It's actually pretty depressing, frankly. I mean, and I look at what I appreciate you guys bringing this presentation, because I know, especially on mule deer, we do tend to focus a lot on the issues around predation, fragmentation, vehicle strike, but these issues around nutrition for our mule deer populations are something that I don't think is, just being fully widely acknowledged. And as much as we could sit there, $50 an acre for a chemical out in the desert. I mean, that's a ton of money. I don't mean to be like a downer, but it's kind of a bad cycle we're in here. So I guess, we keep working at it, but it's a big problem. Yeah. Thank you.
I know that wasn't a question, but I think it is good to look at it as we have a lot of partners who are working on this issue, especially in the John Day Valley. Grant Soil and Water has been doing a lot of work with these new chemicals, and they're hopeful that treating at the right time, particularly after fire, and maybe retreating after monitoring, could get them 15 years of annual grass control. So those are hopeful numbers, but that's the expected outcome for some of these treated areas.
I have a question first. And a couple of mine got answered, including one that you just partially answered right there, Lindsay. But the other question I have is a combination, because we have the treatment and then we do get some bunch grass back, but what's it take? And it was actually encouraging. There is a bit of encouragement that the fire, the fire actually, it sounded like went around after we had, which was a surprise and good news. But could you talk a little bit more about that first? And then I have one other question about the fire would go around these areas. That's sort of encouraging.
Yeah, so in native bunch grass communities, they retain their moisture in their stems and in their leaves far later into the season. I don't know if you guys heard about yesterday at all or anything, but if you look at fire ecology, when it gets into a climate with just a teeny tiny bit more of moisture, the heat's going to be approaching that site, and you're going to get evaporation coming off it, and it just changes the atmosphere just enough that the fire just kind of fiddles out. And so in the areas around that, well, like I said, was mostly BLM or untreated land that was really, really thick with annual grasses, which was really dry and hot at that time. And so the fire was able to just flame on around it. But when it got to these treated sites, it just ran out of fuel.
Oh, good. The other half of the question is whether we have seen sage grouse. And I know the grass comes back, but what about sage grouse? Or sage grass? Have we had luck with it coming back? The actual.
Yeah, the sagebrush community. Yeah, and Ryan can speak about the long-term effects of this. But after that 2014 fire, a lot of the shrub community was removed, and there were replanting efforts. I think we had some poor precipitation years, and along with some other issues with feral horse grazing and pressures on the shrubs, we saw pretty poor recruitment. So we are doing shrub plantings in the fire boundary currently, and we're hopeful that those will be successful. Will depend on precipitation and the conditions we get.
And presumably the cost per acre would even be greater than the.
Oh, it's much more than $70 per acre. Yes. And as we saw yesterday, where they were doing some aerial seeding of sagebrush plants, and they were successful. That's something that we are going to try using mule deer enhancement funds from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and PR. So we will be reseeding with some shrub species, and hopeful that those will take if we target areas.
Thank you.
Sure, and you mind if I add a little to that? Yeah, after the 14 fire, we did do various types of sagebrush seeding and bitterbrush seeding. We were seeing some recovery, but when you get into a repeated fire cycle like we were in, where the fire frequency is apparently now at 10 years as opposed to 75 to 100, those sagebrush communities take quite some time to come back. You're looking at probably 25 years before you really start seeing them recover, and so that makes this all the more frustrating, as Hatfield had pointed out.
Go ahead.
This is more of a comment, but I think you can all speak to it. It just, the invasive grasses is one thing, but also looking at these pictures, you're also surrounded by juniper. You're also dealing with management, either, on BLM if there's grazing, or I don't know if there's grazing happening on Schneider, which can be beneficial sometimes, it can be harmful sometimes, depending. And then you add, climate variability and interannual precipitation and then seeding and picking what seeding you want. And just to highlight, this is a very dynamic system with a lot of things entering into a feedback loop that are all bad. And so it's exciting to see some of these wins. You don't often get to see these pictures where there's a very good case of, this has worked, let's build upon this. To your point, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, it's just very difficult. And but it's great to have projects like this where we can see what has worked, when and how, and try to build upon that. And so I just wanted to highlight how many complex factors are actually happening all here at the same time. It's not just invasive annual grasses, although that's a big part, but those are a result of all of these other things that are happening.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think that that's absolutely right. And yesterday, I think it was heartening to see some of the upland return of, the healthy bunch grasses and even some recruitment of sagebrush coming into the fire on our tour yesterday. But also, post that fire, we didn't have, huge drought conditions like we did earlier.
Yep.
So I just question how much that's affecting, if these big fires come and then we follow them by a couple of years of drought that's pretty severe. I mean, I just think that sets us back. So yeah, so many factors. But I am really glad you guys keep working on it. We have to keep working on it. I don't mean to be like, geez,
Don't
I
say
seem like
that.
such a downer. Like, all right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just honestly, I was going to make a similar point as Commissioner DeFries Hall about just there are so many confounding variables to the work that y'all are doing, whether it's going to be a couple good water years or not, or whether, so, but I really do appreciate the very intentional approach that you're all taking and how we're working across all parts of the agency and kind of bringing different approaches and strategies and good science. So just excellent work and thank you for the presentation. Thank you. All right, so next up we have our Beaver Action Plan update. So I'll invite Adrian up to join us. Thank you again, all of you.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
All right, Sean, are you going to kick this off for us? All right.
Yeah. Morning, Commissioner. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Commissioners, Director Colbert, Director Sean Clements, the Deputy at Fish and Wildlife. So it's been close to 3 years now since we developed the Beaver Action Plan, and we've been presenting to you on an annual cycle. And given that we're close to the end of that 3-year cycle, we thought this was a good chance to look back and ask, how are we doing? And start a conversation with you about what comes next. And so with me today, with Adrian, Samantha, and Nick, they're going to go through a retrospective of how we've done on each of the 4 pillars. And then we'll get into some next steps and some timelines. So I'll be back later in the presentation to talk about that section of it. And I'm going to turn it over to Adrian now.
Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Director Colbert, and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Adrian Averett, and I'm the Acting Interdivisional Beaver Coordinator. We are excited to present an update on the Department's action plan for beaver modified landscapes and highlight the incredible amount of progress we have made over the last 3 years, really short window of time, with existing staff and resources in collaboration with numerous partners. And I just want to take this moment to pause and acknowledge our district staff, our BEA leads, our ability to hire temporary biological science assistants, interns, our fish research staff, our wildlife district bios, like the numerous the village that has their fingerprints all over this. And if they were here with us today, they'd fill the room and flow over probably into the hallway, especially if we included our partners. So I just wanted to take that time to acknowledge that they're lifting this plan and doing this work. As you may recall, we organized the plan as 4 integrated pillars of action to improve adaptive management and coordination across ODFW divisions in the field through Beaver data and science, Beaver habitat and Beaver modified floodplain restoration or habitat restoration, Beaver management, and outreach and communication. And for each pillar, we defined specific actions. We assigned staff leads for each action, and we set achievable action timelines that were also realistic, allowing us to flex as we gained resources and capacity to do this work to advance each pillar goal. Collectively, the integrated pillars provide a roadmap for taking short-term action to advance the pace and scale of Beaver habitat and Beaver modified habitat restoration where possible on the landscape. And although we have several planned actions that are still in progress, others that will be completed over the next 9 months, the next 8 slides will highlight our key accomplishments to date across each pillar. For Pillar 1, the Beaver Action Plan has really put a spotlight on data collection and analysis. Before the plan, ODFW was collecting a lot of data about Beaver, but the problem or the challenge was that the data collection was decentralized, not coordinated, and not consistent across programs. And the plan has really provided a forum for us to reflect and internally ask about how we can best move forward and also help prioritize capacity to compile existing data, improve some of our data processes, provide training workshops to staff and partners, and really integrate data collection across programs. And if you recall from last year, we shared a map of historical detection data, which shows that beaver are present in every major river basin across Oregon and distributed from the headwaters to the mouth in some watersheds. And as an example of this data synthesis work, that map represented the compilation of over 7,000 beaver detection data points. And so that's just an example of the synthesis work we are doing. Through our Beaver emphasis areas, which Nick will speak to about later, our data collection efforts through the BEAs, we are obtaining more fine-scale information on beaver presence, non-damming and damming activities, age of sign, current, recent, and past, and a variety of observations on the landscape about habitat conditions, such as in-stream flow permanence, riparian vegetation condition, presence of invasive species, and or restoration potential at those sites. So going forward, we feel like we are in a much better place through training and process improvement to collect and centralize our data on beaver. And before we move on, I just really want to call your attention to the picture on this slide, which I will talk more about in the outreach and communication update. So I might have you flip back there when I hit that update. For Pillar 2, the Beaver Habitat Restoration Pillar, we set out to be intentional in developing tools to support practitioners and minimize barriers to doing good work. Over the last 3 years, the Beaver Action Plan has served as a catalyst for beaver habitat restoration practitioners to convene workshops, share lessons learned, discuss what is working on the ground, and where there are additional information and resource needs. To meet some of these needs, we have included beaver flow devices and fish passage rules, and developed guidance and application forms to help practitioners navigate their fish passage needs. We have included beaver, as you heard last month, in the State Wildlife Action Plan's key conservation issues to raise public awareness around beaver and the relationship with Oregon's flowing water riparian, wetland, and aspen woodland habitats. And practitioners can also use this information to guide site-appropriate project designs and seek funding opportunities. We have also contracted with Cafarata Consulting to develop a habitat beaver guidance manual for landowners and practitioners that outlines the best practices for creating habitat for beaver where possible on the landscape. And we believe these accomplishments really set us up well for the next steps. And so for Pillar 3, I'm going to pass the mic to Sam Fino.
Thank you. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Director Colbert, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Samantha Fino, and I'm ODFW's Carnivore and Fur Bear Coordinator. As the commission knows, beaver management can be divisive, and one of the commission goals, as well as our own, was to have a vision that everyone could support. The BAP helped create a focus on science-based management that has led to more constructive conversations. In parallel with BAP, there have been several legislative changes that have also helped place ODFW front and center in beaver management, meaning that we now, meaning that we now have full authority. We have implemented new reporting requirements when recording beaver take as a response to damage, and these include but are not limited to land ownership, county, watershed, HUC, and other scales. Additionally, with the implementation of House Bill 3464, district biologists communicate with the public experiencing beaver damage on coexistence solutions. And through our damage database, our understanding of these issues and patterns are significantly improving. Thanks. All of this to say, we are not seeing a lot of beaver damage and complaints. Take is less than 10% as a response to beaver damage. In fact, advice and coexistence support was provided in 78% of complaint calls in 2024. The private forest accord requires ODFW to record and report any take of beaver on all private forest lands. In 2023, there were 10 reported damage complaints on PFAs, only one of greater than 5,000 acres, corresponding to 5 different district offices, and no beavers were reported as taken. In 2024, there were 6 reported damage complaints on PFA lands, only one greater than 5,000 acres. Each were out of a different district office, and again, no beavers were reported as taken. So I think this is all to speak towards our conversations at the regional and local levels on coexistence.
So under Pillar 4, outreach and communication, we have increased opportunities to engage and learn with partners. I want to highlight this photo in the corner in celebration of International Beaver Day on April 7th. Our beaver conservation bios, Conrad Ely and Noah Mary, created and posted a beaver coexistence video to our ODFW Facebook page to raise awareness about tools to reduce human-beaver conflict. We're also collaborating, if you recall, with OSU on a beaver coexistence community science study so we can better support landowners and practitioners in habitat restoration and beaver damage mitigation actions. We are developing new guidance and outreach materials for recent rule changes and also integrating this information into existing resources such as our Living with Beaver document. We have created the Beaver Action Plan Partnership as an information sharing forum to maintain plan momentum. And we are also expanding our work by participating in new partner-led projects, working groups, and outreach events. And so for slide 5 that I asked you to keep in your minds. That is an example from this past Tuesday, actually, where I attended a beaver activity survey workshop hosted by our North Fork Burnt River Beaver Emphasis Area Leads. We had 14 attendees at that workshop representing the Powder Basin Watershed Council, BLM, U.S. Forest Service, and ODFW employees from Fish, Wildlife, and Habitat divisions. And as I mentioned, the picture from slide 5 is from that workshop. At the end of the day, it was a Beaver Palooza day, let's just say. At the end of the day, I participated in a Beaver Pub Talk at Barley Browns, along with partners from the Nez Perce Tribe, Powder Basin Watershed Council, Greater Hells Canyon Council, and Wallowa Resources. We had a packed house of approximately 68 attendees over the 2-hour period, and our BEA leads, Kirsten Russell, Philip Perrine, and Union Baker Fish District biologist Ethan Brandt were in the audience and available to meet attendees one-on-one to answer questions. And additionally, various ODFW staff are attending Castor Camp this weekend in Fossil, an event organized by one of our partners, Western Beavers Cooperative, to foster practitioner networking and shared learning around beaver ecology and habitat needs, habitat improvement, and living with beaver. The plan is also drawing beaver-related proposals to ODFW funding sources. OCRF and PFA have allocated $1.85 million to 18 projects that have direct ties to Beaver since 2020. 15 projects span a total of 27 counties, and 3 of the projects were statewide. The project types included habitat restoration, coexistence, survey and monitoring, and outreach and education. And just for an example of scaling up, if we look at the 2020 and 2021 projects, that's only $50,000 of this total, just to give you an example. If we cast that funding net just a little bit wider to include projects that identify Beaver as a secondary benefit, the total funding amount increases to $6.13 million allocated to 28 projects, and that net now includes 29 counties and 4 projects statewide. And to spotlight our Beaver emphasis area work, I'm going to pass this off to Nick.
All right. Thank you, Adrian. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, for the record, I am still Nick Myatt, the East Region Manager. So as we were implementing actions under each of the pillars, we wanted to, take our actions to the ground at a scale that was manageable given the resources that we have and learn from the work that we're doing. So we chose a diversity of places across the state for these BEAs that have a variety of needs. We wanted to learn what works and what doesn't to help kind of inform our management as we scale up in our actions. In some areas, we're building and expanding partnerships. In others, we're working on improving our data and getting boots on the ground. Some of these areas in new watersheds where we haven't had a large presence. The BEA concept, I believe, originated from the Rogue South Multi-Species Conservation Plan, the Evans Creek Priority BEA. So we applied that concept at a larger landscape level scale. Our focal areas for implementing these actions in the plan. So we're building on and cultivating partners. Projects, quad cap. Issue. So I did take heavily involved in each of these, collected some stats EAs to share today. So one is the work. Two, there were 2 Beaver signs that were completed. And activity in all survey sites. About 20 miles of survey documented 70 beams that were observed in that system, and just some really amazing work going on down there with partners as well. Trout Unlimited and other partners in that area installed 218 Beaver Dam analogs. So some great work there. Moving here more locally, kind of close by where we were yesterday on the tour, the Willow Creek BEA, in a survey last year of a 5-mile pilot project, reach on private land, observed 45 beaver dams on that survey. We have the Malheur Watershed Council is designing 3.4-mile riparian restoration project with technical assistance funding that they've received through that project, and we're optimistic those private landowners are going to allow pre-treatment beaver surveys on that. So a unique opportunity there, focused largely on private land. And then moving just north to where we were yesterday into Baker County, our North Fork beaver emphasis area. That's because when I actually go in the field, district biologist, I worked on some beaver issues of the same spot. But we're taking advantage of a very strong partnership with the Powder Basin Watershed Council, as well as the Wildlife and National Forest, with a lot of work on public land in that area. We've done surveys on many of the streams off the main, as well as the main fork of the Burnt River there. As we started that project, one of the things we heard from the partners was that equipment was a big limiting factor. Of grant sources for, there's existing staff, grant sources for hiring or buying fencing materials and things like that, but a lot of the granting entities don't like to purchase equipment. So they highlighted that for a need, and we have some more flexible funding to do that. So we spent $63,000 on purchasing equipment. In the shop in my office at LeGrand, we have a whole wall of chainsaws now. It's kind of cool. But a lot of different equipment, and we formed a collaborative agreement with these organizations where they can rent and check out equipment from obviously free of charge to use on those restoration projects. And then we also, for the last 2 years, through our internship program with ODF&W, we've had 2 interns each summer that we've dedicated a portion of their time to helping the partners on the ground with some low-tech beaver installations, doing some BDAs. And Adrian, I'm going to have to ask PALs. PALs? What's a PAL?
Post-assisted log structures.
Okay. Doing some of those, evidently, doing some buck and pole fence exclosures to exclude grazing herbivories to allow aspens to regenerate, as well as doing some directional falling of trees into the streams and rivers to increase that habitat complexity. We have surveys. I think Adrian mentioned a training. Have surveys planned for October of some randomly selected points there with ODF&W, the Watershed Council, Forest Service, BLM, and hopefully the East Region Manager. So anyway, just a few case studies to highlight some of the work that we're doing on these BEAs around the state.
In reflecting on how much we have accomplished so far in such a short period of time, we can confidently say that the Beaver Action Plan has given us a solid foundation as we think about next steps. The 4 pillars have provided a good overarching framework, while the focused actions provide a practical work plan integrated across divisions in the field for advancing the plan's goals. And the plan has helped strengthen our partnerships in this work, while also creating and catalyzing new opportunities to work with our partners on shared goals at the local, state, and regional levels.
Well, Pleasure. Members of the Commission, Director Colbert. I am still Sean Clements, Deputy at Fish and Wildlife. And I hope you can agree that we have come quite a long way in the last 3 years. And a big reason for that success is sitting next to me here. So Adrian's been serving in an acting role as the Interdivisional Beaver Coordinator. This work occurs across the agency, fish, wildlife, habitat divisions, regions. And Adrian has been the glue that's kind of held all that together. And so as we think about transitioning to next steps and moving from more of a short-term implementation over 3 years to longer term, Adrian has actually agreed to work in that position in a permanent capacity. So she'll be moving into headquarters organizationally. She'll be staying out here physically, but we're happy to make that move. And I think it's really going to help us transition to long-term. Next. So with that said, I said this was the start of a conversation. We still have work to close out our 3-year plan. As you heard from Nick, there's some work to do on the BEAs this fall. We have the habitat guidance for practitioners is coming online probably in February, March. Samantha's working on some GIS tools that will help practitioners guide where they work based on our detection data and some habitat data. And then Dr. Megan Jones at OSU is also wrapping up her work on the conversations with practitioners and landowners. A lot more to come. And as we get that in the spring of next year, I look back at are the pillars the right way to approach this going forward? Are the BEAs the right tool? If they were, then do we need to stay in the same places, or do we move? If they're not, then what else? And then we're also going to be talking to practitioners about where we start thinking about how we can fill those going forward. And so I think this will be a conversation with you. What comes next will occur over the next year or so. And I think we can kind of end there and start a conversation about, like, how do you think things have gone?
Thank you. And it looks like you generated some questions, all of you. So thank you for the report, and we'll start some questions and then go ahead.
Okay, and thank you, Chair Walt. So I'm gonna blow a little smoke on Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde. So when we started doing all of this, it was this process was very contentious and very acrimonious. And so we decided as a commission and a department that we would put together this work group, and Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde participated in that entire process as a previous commissioner did too. And the end result was a really good project and a really good report, I think, is the Beaver Action Plan. And so now I'm in 3 years, and Adrian, I do not want to put more work on you, but Nick touched on it just a little bit. You've talked about the OCRF and PFA funding, 1.85 million, 18 projects. There have been Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board has probably put millions of dollars into projects. Watershed Council's voluntary projects around the state in the last 3 years implementing the Beaver Action Plan. And it would be really nice if we, maybe at the 5-year level, if we could say, as a result of the Beaver Action Plan and the pillars and the direction that the department gave, here's how many millions of dollars have been spent on the Beaver Action Plan and the good work that's gone on around the state. And here's the projects that have been completed. And so we can show the public that we heard you, we implemented a Beaver Action Plan, and here's the results of that. So that one, where do we go from here? It would be really nice at the 5-year level if we could do something like that to say, it's not just on the shelf. It's a plan that we, as a department, and we got funding for it, and we've got partners but we've got a lot going on and a lot of projects going on around, a lot of good work going on to implement that Beaver Action Plan. I think it would be really good, maybe at the 5-year level, to have some kind of a report that says, good.
Thank you. Commissioner King.
Thank you, Chair Wall, and thank you for the report. I remember I came on the commission when these work groups were starting, and there was another one was a different one. There were 2 or 3 of them going on, and you're right, it was very contentious and very hard. Lots of working groups, hundreds of $1,000s spent. And even when we had our first stab at the Beaver Management Plan, we kind of had to go back. It wasn't quite there. My question is, I think we have come a long way, but then I also question, have we? Because the legislature has stepped in since and caused a whole big hullabaloo. And how is that going to impact what we are doing, or is it going to impact what we are doing now, particularly in the issues around trapping and around, I guess it would be land use. And I think, something with federal lands, and how does it all interrelate? And how is that going to impact what you're doing? Because showing your state map. So I'll just let you try and answer that question.
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, appreciate that question. And I think the Beaver Action Plan was really developed as a tool to bring people together, right? There's a lot of contention here, but this is a pathway that everyone can get behind. It's science-based, looking towards an outcome of increased pace and scale of beaver restoration and beaver modified habitat restoration. And I think the plan itself has done that. That's not to say that there's still contention not out there. And we can control what we can control, and the legislative process is a different process that we engage in. We still keep moving forward on our path because it is bringing people together. It is achieving some outcomes, and that in the long run is going to reduce the conflict that's out there. So I think we stay the course. Excuse me. A follow up there.
I get you're dying in the hush. Saying, I mean, I understand that. And yes, this is the way forward. And we'll have to keep, having these conversations and trying to find the way through. But when the legislature comes in and does something actually kind of completely counter to that, they didn't try and cooperate and communicate. They just put in like these blanket bans that, and we can't. And so how do we kind of get around or react to that? Because that will, I think, impact what we're trying to, that's kind of what I'm trying to say. Hopefully I've said that be clearer.
Yeah. Excuse me. So Chair Will, Commissioner King, maybe just to back up on what the legislature did. So they put in place a trapping ban on public lands that are within 3D listed category 4 or 5, I think, areas. Areas that are water quality impaired on federal lands. There's going to be a trapping ban going forward. And there are existing bans on public lands already. There's 3 or 4 throughout the state on forest lands. So this just expands that area. And I think what that does in terms of implementing our plan, we're looking at beaver restoration, right? And beaver modified habitat restoration. So trapping ban, when you look at the data, it's going to impact maybe 4 or 5% of harvest on the landscape currently. What that's going to mean is functionally probably not a lot, to be honest, about how beaver are going about putting beaver modified habitat on the landscape. It is going to reduce opportunity on the landscape for harvest. But I don't think ultimately it's going to affect our goal of more beaver and more beaver modified habitat. What we're finding in a lot of those areas is that it's really the management and the lack of habitat for beaver that is causing beaver not to be there, not harvest. And so we need to address the limiting factor of what that habitat is, which is partly what the guidance manual is going to do, and then focus practitioners in those areas to create beaver habitat so that we can then have the beaver modified habitat. So I don't know that long run, the legislature's action is going to have a big impact on what we're trying to achieve. It's just something we have to adapt and move around.
Commissioner King, if I could just add, I mean, to be frank, where we have closures, we would prefer it to be based on kind of a scientific method. So we do already have closures, and it's really unclear whether that has impacted positively beaver population. So I think in the case of this most recent legislation, we don't get to vote on legislation. And what we tried to do is show up with information about the work we're doing and trying to demonstrate that, if you're going to talk about conflict, if you're going to talk about trapping, as an agency, we're always going to tell decision makers to focus on science. And we gave alternatives, that might have actually turned some of those things into more of a study around the benefits of closures. But again, we don't get to vote on legislation. So we now have a new law. We will implement the law because that's what we're required to do. But we're going to continue to show up and try to remind people that when we take management actions, we do it based on science, not just on blanket kind of policies.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions, and then I have a couple. Yes,
Because it's directly related to this.
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
Okay. I do want to weigh in because we are kind of fiddling around the issue, and I agree with Director Colbert that basically the legislature decided to do something different. And we did a several $100,000 process that was kind of 2 processes. One was creating the Beaver Action Plan, and one was determining, different things around trapping. I do think it's okay to mention that we did in a previous meeting that it was pretty disappointing that the didn't take much time looking closely at and on that. And I think we actually hurt the trapping community with the action that the legislature took. And that has impact matters, even though they're like the tiny subset of stuff going on out there. But I just, I don't want it to take away from the enthusiasm of plan and the work. But I do have that happen. And I don't think there's anything we can really do about it except just show up respectfully as an agency and a commission and keep doing our work. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer, frankly. And they're pretty pissed, frankly, right? They're not very happy, the trappers. So there we go.
Commissioner Dallas DeFries, thank you.
I'm going to go in a completely different direction. First of all, I'm usually not a sucker for cute pictures, but I really enjoyed the beaver pictures on the slideshow. Again, my next question is, and I'll try to articulate it clearly, as a new commissioner, I haven't been here since the inception of the plan and kind of the beginning. I'm curious, you've developed this plan and what's been the biggest, and are you now a different direction that you necessarily didn't expect, or is this kind of in line with how you've expected this to go and be on the ground?
Yes, Commissioner Hall DeFries, Chair Wall, members of the commission. For us, when we built this plan and we sat in Zoom meetings or Teams meetings working on this and putting these actions together, because really this was our guidance plan, our work plan to say, hey, what can we get done? We're not getting new resources. We're not getting a big pot of beaver money. What can we confidently try to accomplish? In those meetings, I think we really took a eyes wide open pilot approach of, let's see how this works. Let's bring data together and see what it tells us. And that map last year, was pretty impressive to bring data, not only from our own staff and programs, but other sources out on the landscape. As Sean mentioned, we have Sam that's really working on some cool tools. And so I think the surprise for me, like seeing under the hood of this, is just all the little blips, how the network is lighting up, right? It's not just our network, but really when we meet with partners and we talk about things, we are getting new ideas. We're talking about, hey, we want to do a pub talk over here. We have really cool partners like Reese Mercer at Western Beavers Cooperative in Fossil all weekend long, talking about beaver and getting practitioners together. And I think the magical part of this is really that engagement, shared learning spaces, and really being adaptive to, hey, what's firing online, and thinking about seizing those opportunities as we move forward and how we can grow them and meet practitioner needs. Did I answer it?
Sure. Well, Commissioner DeFries, I just want to add on to what Adrian's saying. Like, if you spend an hour with Adrian and just talk through some of the things that are going on out there, that is some of the surprising stuff to me. Like just how the action plan, Adrian, the coordinator, really moved forward a lot of these partnership conversations. And just like even 2 days ago, she was talking about the Working John Day, the pub talk. There's so much of that going on that I was not aware of previously, and I think has really increased in scale. So that's been a bit of a surprise.
Let me go ahead and then I'll come back to you if I could. Thank you for all of the work, of course, and it's great to have this one back in front of us. It was useful to hear Nick's 15-year perspective of it and just see what was, what is. I especially appreciate a few of the things that we heard about today from a surge of work, which is exactly that boatload of going on. A lot of it is, by definition, almost lead to actions, which make me appreciate very much that we are you're trying, what you said, Sean, about having a workshop or a wrap up of some sort in the spring, and then we'll get this back in front of us either in June or September when we typically hear it. I think it's really useful to note that we did set up the BEAs, and it sounds like we have leads in all or most of them. And the surveys are happening that they were, that's in the list and that's getting done. So I think there's really important work being done. The piece that it seems that I probably would be most excited about is that it seems to be leading toward both deep interconnections, which is congratulations on your position, by the way, that we really, that department is not just talking about, but doing cross division, cross group, cross purpose, all of those things. And it seems to be adding up. And I think that's remarkable. The case studies are terrific. Maybe we can figure out even a way to make what the legislature did. Another way to look at it would be see if there's any information we can gain from that for our own scientific purposes and make use of it as well if we can. I think I heard that the OSU work is almost finished. So that'll be part of this. We'll hear about that in the next roundup. So I think that my conclusion is that we have a lot of work in progress. It's being connected. I still have my perennial question about the metrics and how do we know that there is actually environmental benefit, that this is changing the on the landscape, big picture, is this changing things? And that would be one question I would just, if there's any could respond to in that general question is this adding up to things that we can measure for progress on the ground?
Chair, well, yeah, I think that's something we actually considered. Can we pull that together for this talk? But just given the time scale, we didn't have time. We're interested in looking at that, right? So we track through time that we are actually scaling up the work. Adrian mentioned the projects that are being funded by OCRF, PFA. Commissioner Labhart mentioned the work that's going on at OWIB. I think there's to show that, hey, here's where we were in 2023, 24, and here's where we are now in 2028. And also show that geographically, are we working in the priority areas? And that's something that Samantha's working on, is helping guide practitioners and where that work would occur. So I think, yes, in the future, we will be able to do that. We just weren't quite there today.
Thank you. You want to respond, and then I have one more, but it's a detailed question. No, go ahead. No,
I was going to wrap it up.
Oh, okay. When you're talking about practitioners, are those staff, or are you talking also about that world of people out there doing the watershed councils and all of? Okay, thank you. There was a question from Commissioner Lab.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
So I'm going to specifically answer your question, Sean. And I wish I could jump up on the table so I could speak really loud about this. The way that I would recommend highly that we move this thing forward is we get, and as Chair Wall mentioned, we get the 1% for wildlife bill passed. That 1% for wildlife bill raises the lodging tax, the state lodging tax 1%, still lowest in the nation. If you add 1% on, it's still the lowest in the entire 50 states in the nation. And it says specifically the monies generated would go into Oregon's wildlife sub-account, and on specifically 0.5% would go into the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. Well, that's 0.5%. It's not very much. It's actually millions of dollars that would go into the wildlife sub-account, which would fund the Beaver Action Plan, which would fund projects on the ground, which would do good things. And so I'm really speaking not to you, but to the public that's watching out there. I hope that the legislature does say, we're going to do some good things for wildlife and pass the 1% for wildlife bill when it comes up again. I think, and it will. So that's my soapbox. That's what it's going to really do, some really good things for Beaver and a lot of other things with ODF&W. It's a game changer.
There's your segue.
Boy, that's a great way to finish, Commissioner Labhart. Thank you. Thank you all for putting together such a great summary and kind of early retrospective. I am really proud to see the work that we've done. And I, again, there's a lot of work to be done within the state on so many things. And what makes me proud is like, once again, we went to our staff and we said, and we'd also like for you to do this. And they really rose to the occasion and have been leaning in across the agency, across the state. And I just really, really appreciate all of the work that's been done. So.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you for the report. We go right on to temporary rules.
Yes, commissioners, next we have the temporary rules for your ratification. There's 6 or 7, actually. There's 7 in your packet. One of them is an error. So of the 7 that are in your packet, there are 4 that relate to Coos and Umpqua, and those are really some additional opportunities for additional hatchery fish in the Coos. And then in the Umpqua, just following through on the actions you took to set a quota in that area. And then once the quota was met, closing that fishery.
Can I ask a quick question right there? That one is just putting in writing what we decided when we had the Umpqua in front of us.
You adopted that rule, but then we had to close it once we reached quota. That's
Thank
right.
you.
And then the remainder are just our typical in-season Columbia management. So those are the remaining 3. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I do want to just note that the motion has changed to ratifying 7.
Being no hands up with questions, can I get a motion on this one?
Yeah, sure, Chair. Well, I'll read the motion. And it's 7, right? No, it's
Yes.
edited to 7. Okay, got it.
Yes.
I move to ratify the 7 temporary rules set forth on the September 12th, 2025 agenda.
Thank you. Second, been moved and seconded to ratify the 7 temporary rules as was just read into the record. Commissioner Labhart, yes. Could we get a thumbs up vote on this one, please, commissioners? And it's unanimous, Michelle. Thank you. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back.
That's great. Thank you.
And then we'll. What?
Yeah, I had it. Okay.
And we really disagree on some things. So I know that maybe is not something we should be taking our time focusing on in a busy day when we got a lot going on, but I just want to say thank you to this commission, to this staff, to the public, to Director Colbert, to everyone. Let's keep it up because we model it here, and that can be contagious too. And that's how we must behave, right? So anyway, there you go, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, how about a round of applause for Chair Wall?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And with that, I'll be my usual self and go right into the next topic. We don't, by the way, have, thank you very much. We don't have anybody signed up for public forum. It's the first since I've been on the commission, I think, that we have not, but that lets us go right to Exhibit B. And
Actually,
so will you two come up?
Chair, quickly. Please do come up because I just wanted to mention, because we did not mention in the tour yesterday and we still not mentioned today, we're almost at 25 years post 9/11. So let's not just breeze by that, because some of that is informing what Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde is talking about. So yes, today is now September 12th, but we kind of breeze by these things too quickly. But next year is the 25th anniversary of 9/11. Like, just don't take that lightly. Let us not forget. That's all I will say with that.
Thank you, Commissioner King. And
I have a question.
keep that.
I was on the agenda.
There's no one signed up for public forum.
I'm on the agenda on that.
Your topic was, you want to speak to the big game?
Say again.
Big game is where, yes, and so that will be that topic. We'll call you.
All right, I just didn't want this.
You know what, I probably confused that issue. Public forum is where we ask people who have topics not on the agenda at all, but want to have 3 minutes to put some topic in front of the commission. So that's what public forum is, and we'll definitely get to yours as a testifier under your item. So, thank you. And maybe what the vice chair just said went to my head because I jumped one ahead. So you're just gonna, so we're gonna do the minutes very quickly. Are there any questions or additions to the minutes? If not, could I have an?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the August 15, 2025 meeting minutes and continued authority to correct grammar and punctuation.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to move and approve the, moved and seconded to approve the August 15th, 2025 meeting minutes as was read into the record, and it was Commissioner Labhart and Vice Chair. We have a thumb vote on this one. Thank you, and it's unanimous, Michelle. And now we can go to item B. Go ahead, Brian.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, members of the commission, Director Colbert. For the record, I'm Brian Wolfer. I'm the Deputy Administrator for the Wildlife Division with the department. On this next exhibit, you're going to hear about our sage-grouse conservation assessment and strategy, which is before you for adoption. As a reminder, you were given an update on this last month at the August commission meeting, where our two staff here gave you an update on some of the changes and key components of that plan. Yesterday in the tour, which unfortunately I missed, I understand you were able to see some real examples of sage-grouse habitat, some of those threats that are incorporated into this plan, and see examples of things like eco-states and what the different eco-states are striving for, which are included in our administrative rules. Before we start with the presentation, you were handed a draft motion. We found an error in that bracketed crossout that resulted in an incomplete sentence. And so we've got that before you in the draft motion. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff to introduce themselves and start their presentation.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, members of the commission, Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Michael Klein. I'm the Upland Game Bird Coordinator.
And for the record, my name is Skylar Vold. I'm the Sage Grouse Conservation Coordinator.
Today, we're pleased to present the final draft of the Sage Grouse Conservation Assessment and Strategy for Oregon for adoption. And maybe could we start the presentation? Okay, there we go. I thought it might be useful to run through a kind of a timeline of events of how we got to version 3 of the Conservation Assessment and Strategy. You'll hear us refer to it as the CAS, just to save some words. The first version of the CAS was written 20 years ago in 2005. In 2010, the Fish and Wildlife Service released an Endangered Species Act listing decision that said that greater sage grouse warranted listing, but they were precluded by higher priority species. And they said they would review the status again in 5 years in 2015. So 1 year after that listing decision in 2011, ODFW published the next version of the CAS, which included the best maps to date of sage grouse habitats and adopted the core area approach that we use today and is in OAR. Meanwhile, the governor's office convened a collaboration group named the Sage Grouse Conservation Partnership, or SageCon, to gather up all the partners involved in sage grouse management and conservation to develop a plan. This was a remarkable effort that described all of the critical action items that partners would need to accomplish to reverse the trends in sage grouse declines. At the same time, in 2015, the Fish and Wildlife Service decided that the new protections that we had enacted as a state were adequate to protect sage grouse. This includes the state's mitigation rules for sage grouse, which were adopted at that time. Unfortunately, sage grouse continued to decline throughout this period. In 2011, this prompted the BLM to, 2021 rather, BLM to announce plans for a range-wide amendment of their sage grouse resource management plans. They were previously amended in 2015 and 2019. This was a big deal and had the potential to impact the way a big portion of Oregon's sage grouse range is managed. For us, it was important that the BLM was using the same habitat maps as ODFW, which is a major reason why we initiated this whole process. And those maps live in the CAS. So first we updated the maps, and those were included in the BLM Resource Management Plan Amendment, which was great. DLCD also uses these maps for their sage grouse rule OARs. And in the meantime, as you know, we've been working to update the document itself and give it a new purpose that is specific to ODFW's responsibilities, which is where we've arrived today. As I just mentioned in the timeline, there are 3 overarching documents that guide sage grouse management in the state. First, we have the Sage Grouse Action Plan, the Oregon Sage Grouse Action Plan, which was adopted by executive action by Governor Kate Brown in 2015 and is overseen by the SageCon Partnership. So it's a comprehensive document. It's all partners, all actions, and it does outline the responsibilities of ODFW. And so that's what we use to outline our new document. And so in the CAS, we focus primarily on describing ODFW's roles and responsibilities. We should also mention that sage grouse are a species of greatest conservation need and are listed in the SWAP due to our long-term population declines with this species. But the management recommendations in the SWAP refer back to the CAS. So it's tiered to this document.
Could you say that last sentence again?
Yeah, so if you were to read the sage grouse section of the SWAP, it would say the recommendations live in the CAS. So what we should do, this is the document. Finally, the BLM Sage Grouse Resource Management Plan record of decision was signed for Oregon earlier this year. This plan is specific to BLM lands, but it does incorporate our habitat maps.
Thanks, Michael. So a significant part of the Conservation Assessment and Strategy update was already accomplished when the Commission adopted the updated core and low density habitat map in December of 2023, which is the map that's shown here. The significant habitat map delineates core habitats, which include those areas that covered 90% of known sage grouse habitat based on breeding density, and then low density habitats, which cover the remaining 10% of known sage grouse range in Oregon. The core and the low density habitats are subject to the ODFW sage grouse mitigation rules, which we will go over briefly in one of the upcoming slides. It's also important to discuss the relationship of the new sage-grouse habitat maps to other agencies. The Land Conservation and Development Commission adopted the updated maps into rule January 2025, and DLCD has a few steps to take before these rules are fully implemented. We're currently working with them during this process. We're also working with DLCD on an outreach plan for Grant County, which is the one county in sage-grouse habitat that was not included in the DLCD rule in January 2025 due to a small area that was affected in Grant County. So on the map, you'll be able to see a couple small areas highlighted where sage-grouse habitat overlaps Grant County. DLCD is discussing inclusion of Grant in their next update to the rule set in 2027, which would mean that any potential development proposed in the vicinity of those green circles, which are kind of difficult to see, would be subject to the mitigation hierarchy. And then lastly, as we've mentioned, ODFW coordinated very closely with BLM during their recent planning process to incorporate this updated sage-grouse map into the 2025 BLM RMP, which was very significant. During the August Commission meeting, we highlighted some of the major updates to the plan, those topics that you see here in the blue blocks. And these include the new population model and the new population and habitat objectives. And today we want to cover the remaining major topics that are updates to the CAS shown in these orange blocks. We'll then discuss the feedback that we received during the update process, and we'll present our staff recommendation for adopting the plan into rule. All right, so first, how we classify our leks is important. ODFW refers to sage-grouse leks by conservation status based on the number of males observed at a lek over a period of time. Leks are classified, as you can see on the right here, as occupied, occupied pending, unoccupied, or historic. And this classification system is used to guide sage-grouse lek monitoring, where recurring survey effort in the spring is focused on those occupied and occupied pending leks. And additionally, sage-grouse habitat management is often guided by these lek conservation statuses, where performing habitat restoration and uplift treatments in closer proximity to the occupied and occupied pending leks is encouraged for the greatest benefit to our local breeding populations.
Skylar, can I just interrupt just for a second?
Yeah.
Just for the public, we all know what leks are, but there might be people watching that go, I saw this lady here go, huh? What? So maybe just identify what a lek is.
Thank you, Commissioner Labhart. I appreciate that. A lek is a communal breeding ground. It's not an abbreviation, but it is maybe a Finnish term for, it means to play. And it's just this term where we refer to these locations on the landscape where the male sage-grouse congregate in the spring, March and April, and they have a courtship display for the females. And that's where the breeding is done. So we're able to track these populations by going to the lek locations, counting the number of males on the leks that are displaying, and then year after year, if we go back to these same locations, because they have high site fidelity to these locations, we're able to get a good population trend. So thank you, I appreciate that. So in addition, BLM's 2025 RMP frequently refers to these lek statuses to guide their management objectives and direction. And then lastly, the lek conservation statuses are used by ODFW sage-grouse habitat mitigation program, and they're also referenced in the DLCD sage-grouse rule. So we updated our lek definitions to be in close alignment with the WAFO range-wide standards, while still including all possible lek situations, regardless of the lek survey history. And part of this update was extending the assessment period from 7 years to 10 years to make sure that we capture a full population cycle for this definition. There's been a large paradigm shift in how we prioritize habitat restoration work in the sagebrush ecosystem. And importantly, as you saw during the tour yesterday, this range-wide strategy originated from a group of Oregon rangeland scientists. The strategy starts with a conceptual model called defend the core, grow the core, mitigate impacts. And the strategy guides us to prioritize protecting and enhancing the best habitat first, particularly from those threats of invasive annual grasses, wildfire, and conifer expansion. So our Oregon-based research team took that idea and then developed the threat-based strategic conservation as a way for managers to identify those priority conservation areas. So ultimately, we want to spend our resources first preserving and protecting the best of the best habitats and grow those habitats outward rather than devoting resources, which are often limited, to the most impaired habitats, which have a low probability of recovering. And one of the most useful remote sensing products that came out of this effort was the threat-based ecostates, which we discussed in depth during the tour yesterday. The ecostate maps are a useful tool to quickly describe and quantify rangeland condition at the landscape scale. And these habitat ecostates are included in the new habitat objectives that we'll be recommending for adoption. All right, so regarding mitigation, this section is new to the 2025 CAS because ODFW's sage-grouse habitat mitigation program and the associated rules were not yet established when the 2011 CAS was written. So it's important to note that we're not proposing any mitigation rule changes, but we're simply incorporating this important part of ODFW's sage-grouse management program into the new document. The mitigation program ensures that any development projects within sage-grouse habitat are responsibly placed and will result in a net benefit for sage-grouse. Mitigation debits and credits are calculated using the Habitat Quantification Tool, HQT, which uses the best available science to inform mitigation values. The HQT relies on the updated core and low density habitat map, and it uses the ecostates to quantify impacts to determine those mitigation requirements. ODFW's sage-grouse mitigation program coordinates with all permitting agencies to find the best solutions to siting those necessary large-scale developments. And lastly, the program coordinates with mitigation banks, which supply credits for offsetting large-scale development in sage-grouse habitat, as you saw during the tour yesterday. So the last major update that we wanted to discuss this morning is a section that provides best practices for certain management situations. Translocation is a management tool that should be used responsibly, and with best practices, it can be used to boost genetic diversity in isolated populations. The updated CAS provides guidelines to make sure that translocation is likely to succeed and will not impact source populations. Next, our research projects frequently involve trapping and marking sage grouse, but to date, we haven't provided guidance documents for researchers while trapping sage grouse. So here we emphasize the importance of safely trapping and handling birds. Third, we provide our approach to sustainable harvest management. As you recall, we discussed our harvest strategy at the last commission meeting, and the commission can still expect to hear our recommendations for permit allocation on an annual basis. And then finally, we provide a position statement on captive rearing, which is not a practice that we recommend. Rather, funding and resources should focus on habitat restoration. So all of this goes to say that it covers the major changes we're proposing to the CAS in addition to those topics that we discussed in August, including the population model and the new population and habitat objectives. So next, Michael will talk about the public input that we received during the process and how we address that feedback in the plan.
Great, thank you, Skylar. This slide represents our process in bringing the plan to its final stage. Since we last met with the commission in August, we've been busy incorporating all of our partner and public feedback into the final draft, which was then published on the website where we notified interested parties. And so that's been available on the website. We've received comments and input from really all corners of the sage grouse world. Farmers and ranchers, hunters, conservation groups, federal agencies, university researchers, and others. So we were really happy with the engagement that we received. This word cloud represents the types of input that we received. So the larger the font, the more input we received on that topic, if that makes sense. The majority of the comments were related to habitat. which is a positive thing because we know that's the crux of our sage grouse population issues. And while ODFW doesn't physically manage much of the sage grouse habitat at ODFW, we can work actively with landowners, agencies, and through the LITs, the local implementation teams that have an active hand in habitat restoration. We chose not to be extremely prescriptive in habitat recommendations, really because each situation has different challenges depending on the land ownership and the site history and things like that. Grazing received a lot of comments. The headline there is that responsible grazing is absolutely compatible with sage grouse conservation, and it's in the best interest of the ranchers to graze in a way that's sustainable in the long term. We heard on the tour yesterday, what's good for the bird is good for the herd. And we believe that rings true. Rural communities are critical to the persistence of sage grouse, in part because ranches preserve that open land and they offer compatible land uses. We discussed sagebrush removal by mowing or herbicide for fire breaks or to stimulate habitat. That was a hot topic. In general, removing sagebrush structure goes against our habitat objectives. And we added recommendations to support research into improving fuel breaks without negatively impacting important habitats in the process. We talked about healthy understories, forbs, invasive annual grasses, and we added recommendations to the final draft to affirm the importance of understory health. And finally, we received comments from hunters who felt that we were being too conservative in our permit allocations and also requested to be more actively informed and involved. And so we added recommendations to improve our communications with hunters in the final draft.
There's a lot here, right? So adopting the new plan doesn't mean that we're going to put the 200-page document into rule, but instead we recommend incorporating three main elements of the plan: the population objectives, the habitat objectives, including the eco-state definitions, and the final section of the document, which is an easy-to-reference summary and the recommendations from each section. We'll briefly review each of these elements, and it's important to note that the updated core and low-density habitat map is a part of adopting the plan, but it was previously reviewed and approved in December of 2023. We outlined our updated population model during the August Commission meeting, and this model was used to inform our updated sage grouse population goal and management objectives in Division 140. So specifically, ODFW will manage sage grouse to maintain or enhance their statewide distribution and abundance, oscillating around the 2003 breeding population level, about 53,000 birds over the next 50 years. And additionally, ODFW will manage populations to maintain stable or increasing population trends statewide and at the PAC scale. PAC is an abbreviation for Priority Area for Conservation. These are our sage grouse management units. And ultimately, those population trends are assessed among naders or troughs in the population cycle.
The second part of the plan adoption is our habitat objectives. You might remember this slide from the August meeting. Our best available knowledge says that sage grouse will persist with 70% sagebrush cover, but we can't ignore the quality of the understory. Eco-states are remotely sensed layers that allow us to better track the quality of our habitat, and ideally our sage grouse would have all eco-state A, but they will still do well with a combination of A-C, and B. The objectives state that we will manage for a minimum of 70% of these three eco-state categories at both the statewide and the PAC level. And then finally, section 9 in the plan compiles all the recommendations from the previous 8 sections of the plans, which is an easy to reference chapter. And we recommend this section be adopted into rules so that if someone wants to reference the plan, they can easily do so, similar to the approach taken with the mule deer plan. So with that, we will wrap up our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions. And I understand there's some public testimony as well.
So commissioners, do you have questions or comments now? I had one I wanted to just ask, Skylar. I think it was yours. You talked about the BLM incorporating our maps and that was very significant. Could you just say a little bit more about what that significance is?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. Yes, so we coordinated closely with the VLM during their planning process. They have 2 habitat designations. They call it PHMA, Priority Habitat Management Areas, and GHMA, General Habitat Management Areas. And really, the reason that we started this whole update was to make sure that the BLM's designations for their habitat were similar to ODFW's, or driven really by ODFW's process, kind of. Because 73% of sage grouse habitat in Oregon is on BLM managed lands. So during this update to their RMP, we coordinated closely, and ultimately the vast majority of our core habitats ended up being PHMA in the BLM's plan. And then low density habitats were all included in GHMA, and GHMA actually is a little bit more expansive than our low density, was how it ended up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
helps. Others? Then you'll have a chance for questions, of course, as soon as we hear from people who want to testify. And we have 4 who would like to testify. Andy Reber, Rachel Goldman, Taylor Rimbowski, and then Ron Jacobs. And for those of you who are testifying from the electrons, remember that we will be able to hear you, but may not be able to see you. So Andy Reber and then Rachel Goldman.
Can you hear me, if not see me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Director Colbert, and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Andy Reber. I am a public lands consultant assisting Paramount Gold Nevada with requirements related to greater sage grouse for their Grassy Mountain Mine project in Malheur County. I'm here before you today to comment on the updates to the Oregon Sage Grouse Conservation Assessment and Strategy and Habitat Designation. As you will know from the formal comment letter you received prior to this meeting, Paramount is requesting that ODF&W consider making a fine-scale boundary adjustment to the habitat designation map that would exclude the project site from mapped low-density habitat by moving the boundary less than a mile. Earlier this week, Paramount made this request directly to ODF&W. However, because of the timing of this commission's adoption of the CAS and habitat designation into rule may have some bearing on ODF&W's ability to consider a project scale refinement of the habitat map, we're here today out of an abundance of caution to appraise you of Paramount's request and ask that ODF&W be allowed to give this request full consideration, whether or not the CAS is approved today. Notably, the appropriateness of project-level refinements of the core and low-density habitat map is acknowledged by and given provision for correction in the 660 series of the OAR, which states, quote, "The exact location of sage-grouse habitat may be refined during consideration of specific projects, but must be done in consultation with ODF&W," close quote. As you will know from our written testimony, Paramount has identified multiple biological reasons based on independent project field studies and the BLM's draft EIS why the Grassy Mountain project area may not, on closer inspection, qualify as low-density sage-grouse habitat. These reasons include the absence of any sage-grouse or sign of sage-grouse in field surveys conducted across multiple years and seasons, extensive vegetative degradation within the project area, which includes fire disturbance, widespread invasive annuals, and crested wheatgrass monocultures, and the lack of utility of the Grassy Mountain project area for sage-grouse habitat connectivity. In closing, we thank this commission for considering our request, which is to ensure ODF&W has the latitude and flexibility to consider our request for a minimal fine-scale habitat boundary amendment following today's deliberations on adoption of the CAS. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Let's go on to Rachel Goldman.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Director Colbert, and members of the Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. My name is Rachel Goldman. I'm the CEO of Paramount Gold Nevada, which owns the Grassy Mountain Mine project in Malheur County. I'm testifying today to comment on the updates to the Oregon Sage-Grouse Conservation Assessment and Strategy Habitat Designation. Andy Reber, our public lands consultant, has explained our reasons for coming before you today to seek the Commission's support for ODF&W to give full consideration to Paramount's request that a minor habitat boundary modification be considered at the Grassy Mountain project area following this Commission's decision today regarding adoption of the revised CAS. Paramount is mindful that the ideal time to have made our request for a habitat boundary refinement would have been in 2023 when ODF&W solicited public comments on the updates to the core and low density habitat map. At that time, however, Paramount's permitting process had not turned to sage-grouse permitting conditions, nor had the independent field studies of the Grassy Mountain project area been consolidated into formal reports. Additionally, Paramount was not aware that habitat refinements at the project scale could be considered during project development, or that the draft habitat map was available for public comment. Though Paramount regrets this lost opportunity, we believe that belated engagement today is far superior to delaying our request until after the CAS is adopted. Our Dogami commissioned environmental evaluation and the BLM's draft EIS are now available, and we do not want another public comment period to close without sharing the biological data from these reports that we believe support a fine-scale habitat refinement, and requesting that this commission enable ODF&W to give full consideration to our request at this time. As Grassy Mountain is the first mining project to move through the modern permitting process in the state of Oregon, Paramount is committed to setting a high standard for the industry by meeting and exceeding our environmental responsibilities and contributing to the overall growth and prosperity of the local community. Paramount stands ready to work with ODF&W to contribute to greater sage-grouse conservation, both through the mitigation program and by supporting wildland fire control to protect Oregon's treasured wildlife and landscapes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rachel. And for both of you, I did not see questions from the commissioners, so we will go on to Taylor Rimbowski, and I bet that's you. If you'll introduce yourself, and you also will have 3 minutes.
Dear Chair Wall and members of the Commission, my name is Taylor Rimbowski. I'm the Malheur County Economic Development Director. I appreciate everybody's concern with the CAAS, and I followed the progress of Grassy Mountain Mine and its environmental impact statement closely. I'm here today to voice strong support for the project, not just for what it is, but for what it represents, a critical opportunity for meaningful economic advancement in one of Oregon's most underserved regions. Malheur County is consistently ranked among the poorest counties in the state. Unlike other areas, we lack major tourism, timber, and other economic engines. But what we do have is a workforce that's ready, capable, and willing to build something lasting. Projects like Grassy Mountain offer a rare chance to put our people to work and provide for the families with dignity and purpose. The potential impacts go far beyond mining itself. The development of this scale would breathe life into our economy. Hotels, restaurants, gas stations, schools, and small businesses of all kinds stand to benefit. These ripple effects could fundamentally change the trajectory of our region, generating economic activity we've never experienced before. But all of this is at risk. The high mitigation costs associated with sage-grouse conservation assessment and strategy pose a real and immediate threat to the project's viability. These costs don't just affect Paramount and Grassy Mountain project, they send a clear and troubling message to any future businesses considering investment in our area. That doing business in rural Oregon comes with barriers so high, it may not be worth the risk. Making matters worse is the fact that these decisions are being made based on an outdated habitat mapping. The current maps used to determine sage-grouse habitat around Grassy Mountain are not reflective of today's on-the-ground reality. And with that, I thank you guys for your time. Have a great day.
Thank you. And I don't see questions, but I appreciate the testimony. And so Ron Jacobs. And you also will have 3 minutes, if you will.
Good morning, Chair Wall and Vice Chair Hatfield and Hyde and Director Colbert. We appreciate you all being here and the rest of the commission. We had a great day yesterday on our tour, and it was suggested that Malheur County is one of the poorest counties, if not the poorest county in the state. And we look to this Paramount Grassy Mountain mine as being a real boost to our economy in the community if we are able to go forward with this. But I would like to point out that the one of the biggest problems with our sage grouse and the habitat is fire. And it's just unpredictable with our fires. But one thing that we would really appreciate is receiving more additional funding from the state for our rural rangeland fire protection agencies that exist out here, which are mainly our ranchers and those people that are on the ground. So it would be really appreciated if we could have you go to bat for us to receive additional funds for those people. I remember the definition that Commissioner King gave to the mitigation process as we were taught about it a little bit yesterday. I woke up this morning at 4:30 still trying to wrap my mind around this process. And we would hope that the mitigation costs that our Paramount is looking at for our gold mine could be adjusted in some way, recognizing that there is no LECs that are actually going to be directly affected by this mine. I guess there is a potential of noise out to 3.1 miles away from the project. And we would hope that you would be able to consider reducing those mitigation fees. And also with these mitigation fees, I would hope that you could look at that a little bit differently so that the individual ranchers could benefit from some of these mitigation fees. And I would also like to see some of these mitigation fees go to ODF&W with all the work that they do and put in. I appreciate all the work that was presented to us yesterday, and we had a great tour. I would hope that those things could be addressed. And thank you for your time. We appreciate being here.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we don't have questions. And commissioners, that is the end of public testimony. So if staff will come back up and we can start questions. You look like you're. Commissioner Labhart, do you want to start?
Yeah, questions. So as the staff knows, I read all the letters that come in, and I saw the letter from Oregon Hunter Association, and I saw the letter from National Desert Association. I did not see a letter from Paramount. So we've had two processes, at least for public comment. Why didn't we? Why, at least for me, this is the first time I'm hearing about Paramount. So I'm a little bit caught off guard. So could somebody respond, help me understand? Was Paramount approached early on in the process for public comment, or were they aware of public comment? And how come we don't have a letter from them? We just now have public testimony on it. So,
yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart. Today, we're not proposing any changes to the mitigation rules, and so you know what Paramount is proposing isn't on the table today. I think what they're asking is to make sure that that the process is preserved when our mitigation program examines each development action, that they have the ability to be flexible in evaluating that habitat within the project boundaries. And so that ability is not being challenged today. And so so that's why it wasn't included as part of the process.
Okay, so bottom line is approval of this plan does not affect their ability to approach the department about what their concerns is. It's
That
just
is-
part of the process.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, yeah, and really, I think what we just heard from Michael is around the ability to approach and work with us on mitigation. I do think some of what you heard the request for was a modification of the map. And I think it's a little, like, I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying that we have the ability to change the map and to remove grounds from core habitat or low density habitat, but definitely have the ability to work with property owners on the mitigation that results from those designations. The rule that was referenced is a DLCD, Division of Land Conservation and Development rule, that says that DLCD can consider modifications to the map with consultation with the department. And this request came in not very long ago, as they said, I believe, like earlier this week or last week. And so there's still some things for us to look at in regards to that.
So is there anything you need to add to that, Erin?
I don't think there's anything. Well, I guess I will add a little bit that Brian's right. The OAR Chapter 660, those are the LCDC rules that apply to local jurisdictions. And so those rules are not the commission's rules, but they do talk about a process for refinement.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So, yeah, I'm not clear either. So I want to make sure. So in approving this sage grouse conservation assessment and strategy document, if somebody wants to modify the map per se, that goes through DLCD, not through ODF&W. Am I correct on that?
Commissioner Labhart, so the map itself is developed by ODFW.
Okay.
And this body approved that map, adopted that map. DLCD also then adopted that map with the little exclusion for Grant County. And so maybe one of my staff here can help me. But in terms of modifying the map, ODFW would be modifying the map. I believe that modification would have to be looked at by the commission. Whether or not DLCD can make a modification on their own without us also modifying it, I'm not certain of, but it would, if they did, it would create differences between the two agencies.
So if we approve this today, we are approving the map as it is proposed now, not with the proposed modification by Paramount.
Correct. So the map was adopted into rule in December 2023.
Okay.
And so there are no proposed amendments to that map at this time. And so this would just be referencing that map where it lives in this document. So currently the rules that were adopted in 2023 reference that map outside the plan because it was adopted separate from the plan. And then now we're just acknowledging that where it lives now is in this plan in the format that it was adopted in 2023.
Okay, so we're down to the wire here about approving this plan as proposed. And Paramount has come within the last week and said we'd like a modification of the map, which is troublesome. I mean, we're kind of caught between, well, let's do something quick here, and it's a little bit troubling here for me anyway. So I'm not sure where to go now.
I think we have one more comment from Michael. Did you want to make a comment? And then I want to ask one question.
Yeah, Chair Wall, I was wondering if our sage grouse mitigation coordinator maybe would be able to clarify some of this for us because he's the expert. That'd be Greg Jackal. He was here just in case.
Yes, and Chair Wall, if I may, while we're here, our sage grouse management plan, the map, the DLCD process all recognizes that conservation of sage grouse is very important. There are going to be some development opportunities that are important for rural communities, and that allowance is there. But then when it impacts sage grouse habitat, there's a mitigation piece to that, and so the goal is not to prevent development and economic opportunities. It's really to try to ensure those are cited properly, and without a doubt, there's differences in that mitigation expense depending on if that development is looking to occur in core habitat versus low density habitat. And those will factor into really what the mitigation looks like and how much it might cost to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, members of the commission, Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Greg Jackal. I'm the acting sage grouse mitigation coordinator, but as I told you guys all yesterday, I've been doing this for over a year and a half, and so have quite a bit of experience learning the sage grouse rules, learning how other states are doing it, learning how Oregon does it. We have an HQT that's very kind of complex. I tried to describe that briefly yesterday, but definitely in my time in this role, myself and Tom Siegel have worked closely with Paramount. We've met with them 2 times a month, so that's about 20 times over their consultants, and we've never had the request to look at adjusting the map, kind of shaving off a piece of the map. We've always looked at running the HQT as it's in low density. This was the first request we've had on Tuesday of looking at adjusting the map. We've run the HQT, myself and prior sage grouse coordinators have run the HQT multiple times for this project. I think this project has been in permitting for about 10 years. So again, I'm kind of speaking a little bit past my time here, but we've run the HQT multiple times, looking at different options, different boundary changes and things like that. Again, it's sited on the edge of habitat, so that's good. The limitations or the impact of the HQT, it buffers the project boundary. Rachel talked about the noise, right? So these mines do have an indirect impact. So you buffer them, and then you look at those map units, and those map units spell out what the functional acres are going to be because of that noise and because of the avoidance of the sage grouse. So I can't speak to the site. I've never actually been out there, but looking at, there's probably been some exploration, which has probably degraded the habitat. They do drill sites and drill holes, which is generally done, and they avoid the lecking time to do that. But again, I've never been out on the site. Tom and Philip can maybe speak more to that, but we definitely can work with the company and try to refine that number, and looking at avoidance and minimization before we get to that compensatory mitigation point. And so I guess I'm just kind of here to answer any other questions, and if you have anything, I can come back and show you more maps and stuff. So
what I have heard is that we can look at this, we can refine this. There are discussions to go on, and those are allowable under the rules, those discussions, before we get to mitigation. It seems to me that that's a fairly important distinction, that those discussions can happen. Doesn't say we're going to do it, doesn't say we won't do it. It just says those discussions can happen before we got to the point of needing to do mitigation. So that seems like the core of this question. Is that an accurate read?
Yeah, Chair Wall, I think it is accurate. I mean, I think we, as Brian had mentioned, our sage grouse rules are meant to, and especially our mitigation rules are meant to, was kind of a direction to the Fish and Wildlife Service that we have our house in order as far as development. So we worked very closely with all the counties when we approved these rules back in 2015 and 2019 to basically have that assurance to the Fish and Wildlife Service that when there's approval of these large scale developments, that we kind of have our house in order. And that's why we worked very closely with DLCD. So there are caps, right? So like if you go into some of these core areas, you can only go packs, you can only go to 3%, and then you're done. Prior to these rules being implemented, sage grouse core habitat was category 1. We said avoid. I mean, we didn't have an avenue for any development, and now we do. So that's kind of a cool thing. Like we have the ability, and again, with our rules, we try to benefit folks siting on the edge of habitat, and if you're going in the middle of habitat, it's going to be probably a very high dollar amount for mitigation. So hopefully that answers some of the questions.
And it did answer the question that I had, and it also speaks to how important clarity is and why they asked you for that clarity going into these, and why you spent so many years figuring out what those mitigation rules would look like and what these and the maps would look like. So that kind of clarity, I mean, if time is money, usually when people appreciate the clarity that you seem to have developed quite well. So that was it.
Thank you.
We have a lot of questions, and I'm not sure who was first. So, okay, Commissioner King.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Thank all of you. Of course, I've got to commend Skylar on his fantastic lapel pin that you always bring since McMinnville, way back in what was it, December of 23. Yeah, so thank you for that. And then also a fun question for you. Okay, how do you spell lek? And you said it's Finnish for dance. What was it again? Say it again.
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, don't quote me on that. It is a European term. It's to play is the derivative of the word.
And how do you spell it? L-E-X?
L-E-K.
L-E-K, okay. Thank you for that. And now to the serious questions, because this, at least from our point of view as the commission, this thing from the gold mine has kind of come out of the blue in the last 2 days. A process that has been happening since December of 23. And you've just stated you've met with them 20 times. So where is this coming from? Why and now and at the last minute? I'm a little bit confused by the whole timeline. What's going on here?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner King, I can't speak to, so they have a process, the mine has got a process through Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, so DOGAMI process, and we're right at the close end of that process. So maybe that's why it's coming to this board. Maybe it's because you're in Ontario. I can't answer that question why it's coming to the last minute, because this mine has been in process for about 10 years, I think, as far as the permitting and looking at the issues, and sage grouse has been a big issue, but there's others, big game winter range and different things. So this mine has been in the process of permitting for many years. So
and so have they been aware of the map the whole time? Like, just again?
Yeah, they have.
Okay, so we don't have any explanation of why this is here and now. Like, you've got nothing from your 20 meetings.
Well, again, no. I mean, and when we were dealing with another consultant on their 20 meetings. So, and yeah, so like I said, I don't, maybe it's because it's in Ontario, Oregon, and the mine is here.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then as you other people have asked, and it's been answered, is that even if we do all of this today, that doesn't mean that this can't be discussed and revisited and talked about later.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Commissioner DeFries.
Yes, thank you. A couple things. When is the map due? Is there a frequency in when that map is revised? Has that?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Holdefries. We didn't set a specific date, but there is in the plan that we will use the best available science and review the plan approximately every 10 years and the map every 10 years, and include all of the data that we have in that 10-year period in our next revision, incorporating a similar public outreach process that we did, a 1.5 year long outreach process going around to all the counties again, and making sure that we get it right.
Thank you. And then just one comment. I really appreciated the commissioners coming up here and some of the things that he noted. We went through the mitigation process a little bit yesterday. It is quite confusing, and there's even more parts, I think, that weren't quite covered yesterday. It's a very convoluted process, I think, for everything, but just to highlight some of his takeaways, I also believe that, this is a process that we need to look at how we're helping the long-term economy through individual landowners, multiple landowners, and looking at the long-term sustainability of that. And then I would just also say, and this is, a very personal opinion for me from living and having a ranch in a place that's been highly affected by gold mining in our whole valley. But really for Malheur County to not, I assume your highest economic input is also your ag community, to make sure that, you're looking at the longevity and getting what you can to ensure that ag, which I hope is the thing, and I'm sure you do too, will continue in perpetuity in this place in a healthy way as well. So don't sell yourself short on that one either. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Commissioner Labhart, and then we'll come to you. No.
I'm gonna try to split the baby here. So, and I'm kind of thinking out loud because this is really catching me off guard too. So, what I heard you saying, Skylar, is probably the next time the map would be updated is 10 years from now. Okay, so the map is proposed as is. So they've been working on it for 10 years, been meeting 20 times, and then this comes up. Do we have to approve this today? Can we push it off till the December meeting or the October meeting, some rather quickly future meeting where you and staff would meet with Paramount and the county to have a discussion about, since what I detect is, and I'm partly on the science and biology, but also the economic side, as Commissioner DeFries is, I'm trying to figure out if we can get some kind of a, yes, we can work this out scenario here of sitting down with them and saying, well, this is pretty poor habitat, and the 3 point whatever miles, is there a way that we can modify that map to make it work and also to address the biology and the habitat there? So what's the answer to that question?
Could we say just in terms of what the action of the commission is today, just to make sure that we're all on the same page?
So the sage grouse maps were already adopted in 2023. They're not up for readoption today. Today is adopting the action plan and components of it into rule and specifying where those 2023 maps fit into the action plan. The process about refining locations on maps, that's through the LCDC, Land Conservation and Development Commission, administrative rules that apply when a local government is reviewing an application for a permit. And there is a process through those rules where refinement could be considered, and it has to occur in consultation with ODFW. So that whole process that's in the LCDC rules can run its course. And so that's like a separate thing that's not for this commission to decide today, or probably, that's a local government action in consultation with ODFW.
Thank you.
Does that help?
A little bit. So we're adopting the maps as part of the plan that were approved in 2023.
We adopted.
Yeah, but I mean, by adopting this, we're including the maps in that, correct?
You're saying, let's see. Is figure 4.1 just saying where the map is?
Correct.
So in the rule that you're adopting today, you're saying the map, which we adopted in 2023, is figure 4.1.
So it acknowledges the rules we adopted 2 years ago.
And just as a reminder, when you adopted that, it was a pretty extensive process, and we went through a lot of detail about the science and the methodology of that mapping. So, it was a pretty robust process and conversation at that time.
And the feds had to review it afterwards, correct? They looked at it?
It is the maps that Skylar was saying and Michael that have been also consistently kind of incorporated with the BLM, DLCD. So, all of that map-based process through all of those different state and federal agencies has concluded because you took your action in 2023 on the maps themselves.
Thank you. That helps. Do you feel okay with that? And then we can go on to the next question.
I understand.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so my understanding is we already had the baby, right? And I think I would hope that the company also understands that if they've been meeting with you extensively. And I also think this commission gets a lot of, lots of public comment, lots of testimony. This is a good, legitimate business that's planning to site itself here, and they would do their due diligence to make sure and get the materials necessary to us in a timely manner as a commission to read it. So I am like Commissioner Labhart, I did not receive anything from the company in my packet or anywhere when I was reading things. So what I think would be helpful right now to be respectful to the local economy, the concerns about the local economy, that this particular situation, which is not unusual, you're dealing with people that are wanting to put development in low density sage grouse locations in a lot of other places, right? So this isn't like some punitive thing to anybody. This has kind of been around since 23. So if you are this mine, can you talk through specifically what their step would need to be next if they want some sort of a shift? And I know you guys have said this, but for those of us that are slow, can you lay that out again? What it would look like? We're adopting something today that is just using the existing maps that we have today that we adopted in 2023 that has already gone through LCDC. It's an attachment to this plan. It is not adopting the map. We already adopted the map. We already had that baby. So I think we need to adopt this plan. That went through, we've gone through, I mean, literally years of outreach to counties, outreach to ranchers. I mean, Skylar, we know they've been, the commission, the staff here has done an amazing job of kind of vetting a lot of these issues over several years now. So set that aside. I think we need to approve this because it's not what people think it is. We can't change the map today on the fly. If we were going to change a map, we would have to have a lot of information to look at, not do something that we can't even do today. It's not even noticed, right? What can this company do next? And then I also have some comments on mitigation, but.
Okay, Chair Wall, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the plan needs to be approved, and I concur with you. Great work by Skylar and Michael. It's been awesome to be part of this team. I contributed like the one chapter, and they did all the other work, and so just kudos to them. But to your main point, your main question, we can continue to work with the company to refine and work with the local governments. You know, this is both a BLM process and a DOGAMI process, right? So there's both a NEPA process and a DOGAMI process, or parallel processes for this permitting. But we can work with those local companies if they truly indeed want to look at maybe shaving off that section of habitat. Again, we've kind of looked at it multiple times. And the map has been adopted twice. That core area or that low density didn't come off the map. We didn't take it off the last time in 2023 because there's birds around there. One of their potential mitigation sites was only 2 miles away, and their consultant found sage grouse dropping. So there's a little bit of miscommunication between what the field data is showing and what we're seeing. So there's definitely use in that area. But I guess to your point, like we can continue to consult, continue to work with the company, and continue to lower that mitigation responsibility if we can find it, right? It's got to go through our policy. The HQT is a repeatable, it seems like a black box, but it's very repeatable. We can show you how it looks at, and it's it's a pretty cool tool to show like what the actual impact is to sage grouse and their habitats. So
Yeah, we do, but
Yeah.
Commissioner Hatfield,
And
did you have
then
another question?
the second piece that I want to get to, and this was something I appreciated visiting a little with Commissioner Jacobs yesterday, and kind of echoing what Commissioner Dallas DeVries is talking about. What we have, what we do have, and I'm part of them. I have one of these sage grouse plans on our ranch. We have ranch families throughout the Great Basin and in the sagebrush who have put together really good work on their land to mitigate and have the ability to continue to graze and not have this turn into an Endangered Species Act issue for these families across our range. People like John O'Keefe, who's a rancher in Lake County, really spearheaded that, really led that. And it's a big deal that we have that. So, that took a lot of time. And I guess part of my frustration when we look at this mitigation program for projects that are happening in, designated areas, I would like us to consider, how we can, benefit the families that live in this region and are in agriculture in this region to both uplift sage grouse habitat and somehow in the right way, in the legal way, in the whatever, the things take time, that we be thoughtful about where we put mitigation dollars that we do have on the ground and that they benefit these regions, right? So that's my little soapbox on mitigation. And I don't know what we can do with that, but
yeah, Chair Wall, not to
you'll
interrupt.
say yes.
Yeah, no, I will say yes. I mean, I 100% agree with you, and our mitigation rules have folks that are enrolled in the CCAAs. They can 100% enroll and sell credits, and they're just not going to get funded with the federal dollars. They'll use the mitigation dollars to fund those actions that are improving sage grouse. So it's available. It's out there. I think the reason we're not seeing more of it is there's just not as much demand for impact yet, but there will be, right? We have energy development, we have power lines, we've got lithium mines, gold mines. I mean, we've been lucky in the last 10 years. We haven't seen a lot of development in our sage grouse habitats. It's starting to come, right?
Yeah, well, and I also think the other thing is your typical like ranch family spends a lot of time, like, we were loading yearlings to ship out 2 days ago. We don't spend a lot of time understanding the complexity of the mitigation process in the state of Oregon, right? So that's just a piece of, okay. I'm done.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, but I would like to echo one piece that Commissioner Hatfield Hyde said, which is that it's important we've been working on this for a long time. You've been working on it for what must seem like a lifetime, and it's great stuff to have. And I'm glad we're to the point where we're going to be able to adopt the plan. I appreciate this revised draft motion, so we don't have to go back to the edit details of what that one was. The information that you gave us, Greg, I think was really useful in terms of talking about that this is in the area and we can decrease, we may not be able to reduce mitigation costs because who knows how that will play out over time. These things are years long and they're not easy. I think that, in our van, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. This is a rare instance, I think, what ODF&W has developed with the HVP, because to be able to even begin to measure those and compare those so that mitigation is a possibility rather than other options is pretty remarkable. I can't tell you how rare that is in my experience, at least. So I applaud that. And I think your comments are great about the ranching community because they're similar to the ones that we experience on the coast dealing with our own wicked weed over on the coast. So I am very excited to adopt this. I have a question, and I think it's yours, Skylar. In your discussion, you talked about the population objective that's in the OAR. Can you relate that to the 90%? We talk about a state policy to oscillate around the 53,000 from early on, and we talk about conserving 90% of the habitat. Will you talk a little bit about how that plays out? And this is a complete change of topic from the issue we were just talking about, but this one, it would be useful to me to get a little bit of clarity just relating those two things.
Chair Wall, thanks for the question. The question, I think, specifically applies to some language of the policy that is specific to that 90% figure. And the figure in the policy doesn't specify low density habitat. So when we're talking about conserving 90% of a population of sage grouse, that's specific to core habitats or our packs. And the additional 10% of what's known of sage grouse range in Oregon, that's the low density habitats. So the low density isn't specifically spelled out in the policy, but it's still, the maps include what ODFW knows as sage grouse habitat, 100%.
So the short version of these rules, if you read them, I'm looking at the part that talks about the 90%, is we have a state policy basically to hang on to the core habitat. And I get the part about the 10% is the low density. And then my next question that goes right along with this 90% is, well, two parts. One is that of 90% related to current? So whatever, because that can change over time. So is it what's then current or is it right now?
Chair Wall, again, a good question. The population model and the model that we use for the habitat map are two different products. The population model is the one that really specifies the figures, and it's what our new population management objectives are going to be based on. The habitat map they both use the same input data, though. It's all based on the LEC data.
Okay.
So the habitat map considers a 10-year period, so it considers a full oscillation of that population cycle.
Okay.
And that's important, right? Because we want to make sure that we have that full oscillation in there. So it's a bit confusing because it's all not spelled out in the policy and it is two different products, but we're trying to do our best to make sure that they're as related as possible, having that new population model that we can point to a specific number, but also using similar data and actually the same data to drive that habitat model as well.
Thank you. That helps a lot. And it's rare that I actually can say, I think I understand what the rule says. So that's great. So thank you for that. Commissioner Spellbrink.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chair Wall. I wasn't sure if you were seeing our hands up or not. Had it up
People
for a while.
remind me.
Okay, anyway, and there was also a hand up from one of the persons giving public testimony from the company, and if they're still there, I would love to hear their response now that they've heard, our discussion. I think maybe, I guess I'd like clarity. I think maybe one of the reasons they brought this up today was just because they didn't want to blindside us at a later date. But anyway, if they're still on there, I would love to hear their response after listening to the discussion.
Chair Wall, may I speak?
Yes. Which of the two people that is speaking?
This is Andy Reber, and I think Rachel Goldman will also want to speak briefly in response to Commissioner Spellbrink's question. But he's entirely right. We have Paramount in engaging in this meeting. We have no intention of gate crashing your approval of the cast. That's not our intention, nor were we requesting that you hold everything up and do a quick map change when the map had been approved in 2023. We're absolutely not requesting that, just to be clear. Actually, Chair Wall really encapsulated the core of our request, which is we are now, as we were not previously aware, that maintenance actions to the habitat map within the 10-year renewal window do seem to be allowed, not only in the DLCD, but also in the ODF and W regulations, where it talks about map development, map revisions, and map maintenance. And it talks about maintenance actions being done in consultation with the LITs and in consultation with local governments. So we're interested at the appropriate time at, as Chair Wall said, having that conversation with ODF and W. And we realize we're kind of late to the party on this, but the fact is that Paramount was not aware that those kind of maintenance actions were even on the table, and we are now. So our request at this time is not to block your approval of the CAS or delay it in any way, but to simply get the Commission's benediction that having those conversations about fine-tuning map boundaries when new information comes in, as it has in our case with our Dogami environmental assessment and with the BLM draft EIS, that we feel that there's relevant information around which to center that conversation. I hope that helps clarify our request today.
Thank you. I think it does. And Rachel, did you have anything you would like to quickly add to that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what I would add, as Greg mentioned, the project has been in some form of permitting for the last 10 years. And I think this is a reflection of a couple of things. One, I'd mentioned that this is the first mining project to ever move through the modern permitting regime in Oregon. So there are no precedents. We are really the test case for the process. And as that's been going along, we have encountered incidences where, you know, there maybe was a lack of clarity or lack of transparency on certain parts of the process. And I'm not referring specifically to ODF and W, but for the overall Dogami and state process. What's changed for us more recently, however, is that we did see an environmental evaluation that was commissioned by Dogami. It was produced by an independent third-party engineering firm called Stantec, and that was released in 2024. So that would have been after these new maps were adopted. And then we only just recently got the draft EIS from the Bureau of Land Management released last month. And so between these two that do encapsulate historic studies that have been conducted and their own evaluations as well, they reinforce what the company's view was, which was that our land wasn't as well suited or probably well defined as perhaps these current maps would suggest. So we're very enthusiastic to have these kind of more granular discussions with ODF and W now that we're actually at a point with the release of the draft EIS, and we're going to be expecting draft permits from the state in the next short while, let's call it month or two as well. This is the appropriate time for us to be getting more granular on these specific mitigation requirements and costs with ODF and W. So we do look forward to being able to have a more transparent discussion now that we're moving forward.
Thank you both. Staff, anything to add? Oh, you have, I thought it was still up.
Yeah, thank you. So I was just going to ask the question. So first of all, I need to acknowledge I had forgot that we had adopted the map in 2023, and that involved counties, that involved property owners, that involved the whole gamut. And so when we adopted that was process. So I'd be just interested, Greg, maybe your staff, in your what you're hearing is. Do you have any comments on what you're hearing from Paramount?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Labart, I think that just kind of tracks with the process. It's getting close to the end. It's a chemical mine process, which is the first in Oregon. Consolidated permit, so every state agency has a role, including ODFW, DEQ, and so we're right at the end. It doesn't preclude us from rerunning the HUT. I guess for us, you know, the map changed in 2023. We didn't rerun the HQT based on the changes of the maps and the management designation indexes, but we can do that. It's kind of the goalpost rule when the project starts. We kind of base it on that, but we can rerun the HQT and we can work with the company. So I think that doesn't preclude, this process doesn't preclude us continuing to work with Paramount or any other company. So.
Thank you. Vice
Okay,
Chair.
if there's nothing else, I would just like to make the motion because we have all kinds of things to do today. I move to amend OAR Chapter 635, Division 140 as proposed by staff and shown in Attachment 4, except that the adopted language in the second sentence of OAR 635-140-0000 reads, the Oregon Sage Grouse Core and Low Density Habitat Map 2023 is considered the best available science on greater sage grouse distribution, available habitat in core area and low density areas.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I think we have 3 seconds. It's been moved and seconded, and I think we'll go with Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde and Commissioner Spellbrink on that, moved and seconded, to amend OAR Chapter 635, Division 140 as proposed by staff and just read into the record. And let's do a roll call on this one, if you will, Michelle.
Haldefreeze,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Spellbrink,
Yes.
Labhart,
Yes.
Hatfield-Hyde,
Yes.
Wall.
Yes. With great thanks to our staff for that. Thank you all. And we will move on then to item C on the agenda, sport fishing regs. And I think Michelle Weaver is, where is she? She is here. Thank you for that discussion, commissioners. That was useful. Okay. I don't know which of you wants to introduce this one and kick us off, but go right ahead.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Commissioners, Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Michelle Weaver. I'm the Acting Recreational Fisheries Manager for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Do we have the presentation up here?
It's always a test to make that thing work.
Great, thank you. First, I want to just note that on this title slide here, there's a typo. We're going to look at the 26-27 sport fishing regulations, not the 25-26 ones. So we have 2 issues here to present to you today. I'll be discussing issue number 1, the sport fishing regulations and the ocean endorsement. Then I'll pass things off to my colleague, Mike Gavin, to talk about issue number 2. As a fun side note, most of the pictures in this presentation are those that were submitted online from our anglers. So issue number 1, the proposal here is to adopt the biennial sport fishing regulations for the 2026-2027 season and associated Oregon administrative rules as described in attachments 3A and 4 of the commission packet. As we've made progress over the last couple of years, we've simplified our regulations. We've reduced our workload. We've realized savings on printing costs, reduced the overall carbon footprint of printing these regulations. So this regulation book is now updated every 2 years. The regulation book describes the permanent or static regulations for most of the fishing opportunities across the state. The highly dynamic fisheries, like some of our salmon and steelhead fisheries, are managed through separate commission actions or actions by temporary rule as needed, and those fisheries are posted to our website, not printed in this more permanent or static rulebook. So going through some of the regulation change categories we have today, we have housekeeping, error corrections, simplifications, or clarifications. We have new or expanded angling opportunities. We have some changes needed for conservation purposes, some inadvertent restrictions that we're correcting, and changes in consideration of climate change impacts. While we do categorize the changes into these boxes, there's much overlap in how these things are developed. And for example, considering climate change is something that we incorporate to kind of all of our discussions when we're coming up with these rule proposals, especially for new opportunities and conservation needs. So there are 75 proposed changes. This year, most of them, 47 of them, are for the simplification and housekeeping purposes. There's 11 new angling opportunities, 10 related to conservation need, 6 corrections to the inadvertent restrictions, and 1 consideration of climate change impacts. The proposed changes are identified in attachment 4, which in the commission packet, which identifies the current regulation, the page number it exists in our current book, the proposed regulation, and a justification for each change. We provided a variety of avenues for our public and partners to provide input and be involved with the changes we are proposing today. We had direct communication through email, phone calls, and meetings at local levels with our district fish biologists and partners. We engaged with local tribes throughout the proposal process. We've provided a news release that was picked up in several local papers and had some targeted outreach directly with interest group leaders to talk about specific issues and provide an opportunity for conversations. The proposed angling regulation changes were posted to the MyODFW website on June 22nd, and a link was shared widely to solicit feedback. Additionally, the commission packet materials were posted on our website prior to this commission meeting. We provided a dedicated email address to help facilitate communication and receive feedback throughout the update process. Today, the commissioners might hear public testimony on the proposed regulation changes prior to the rulemaking decisions. The written input we received is all in attachment 5 of the commission packet. And if you've read through them, which I know some of you do, you notice the main theme of that was kind of excitement and support for the new spearfishing regulation. So now I want to walk through some of the proposed changes across the state by angling zone. Note again that all of our proposed changes are in attachment 4, and I'm just going to highlight some of them here. So I'm going to start with our spearfishing change. In response to requests to expand opportunity to spearfish for bass and walleye in several locations across the state, we're proposing this opportunity for rivers and streams that currently have no limits on bass and walleye throughout the state. This has become an attractive alternative fishing method in the Coquille River over the past couple of years, and this change will provide additional opportunity across the state. Spearfishing is already an allowable method for non-game freshwater fish, such as carp and pike minnow. Adding bass and walleye to the allowable species list for harvest method will just increase recreational opportunity, and that may in turn end up reducing impacts that bass and walleye have on some of our native fish. Secondly, I want to highlight a change related to the kokanee regulations. This is a statewide change. Currently, the kokanee are considered trout, and we're part of the kokanee bonus bag limit. This was a confusing regulation to the public and to OSP for enforcement. So we're proposing a statewide kokanee specific rule of 10 per day, no size limit, open all year unless otherwise accepted. And this statewide rule will follow with a change in each of the zones that have kokanee populations to help simplify this regulation. This change only applies to those areas that currently don't have exceptions, and so the currently established exceptions will remain. So next I want to move to the Northwest Zone. In the Northwest Zone, there are 2 locations where sturgeon angling will be closed. Sturgeon can concentrate in the portion of the bay upstream of the Highway 131 bridge and into the river upstream of Burton Ridge, where this is the Tidewater Exchange. OSP has identified an increasing concern over poaching of sturgeon in this Tidewater location. The closure is intended to address the poaching issues and should also provide conservation benefits to the sturgeon while they're congregating in this area. Moving along to the Southwest Zone, there are several housekeeping type corrections needed here collectively to change the description of the location of one of the angling deadlines due to the removal of Pomeroy Dam, which was the deadline. So in 2024, that dam was removed, and now we need to just redefine what that fishing deadline is going to be, which will be the East Fork and West Fork Illinois River. Next, moving to the Willamette Zone. In the Willamette Zone, we like to highlight a coho season proposal. The populations of coho are increasing in the Willamette Basin, allowing increased angling opportunities. The season, October 1st through December 31st, will provide the important protections for the chinook and steelhead. This is a naturalized coho population. It's a remnant from past hatchery releases, and we have no conservation concerns for this coho population and have been implementing this rule in temporary rule in recent years. So this year we would like to adopt this into the permanent rule. Yeah. Moving on to the central zone now. Again, this is following through from that earlier discussion about the kokanee limit. Making the statewide rule change helps simplify things. And in this zone in particular, it will result in only 3 water bodies that have exceptions now. The Elk Lake, Odell Lake, and Tuttle Lakes will have the kokanee exceptions remain, and everything else will fall under the statewide rule. In most water bodies that have the kokanee, there's strong self-sustaining populations that can withstand the pressures of the higher bag limits compared to, say, longer living trout. Moving next to the northeast zone. This is a proposal for a section of the John Day River. The section of the John Day River between the railroad bridge and Tumwater Falls is known as the John Day Arm. This is an area that can have cooler temperatures in the fall compared to the Columbia River. This is also a time of year where the lower water levels in the John Day River make navigating the Tumwater Falls difficult for these fish. The fish that concentrate in this area are usually the early returning wild steelhead. So while the fish are concentrating in this area, they can be hooked and released multiple times by anglers. And so this closure will provide an important protection to allow fish time to recover from the higher temperatures of the Columbia River and then rest while they're waiting for the water levels to come up and help navigate the fall so the fish can move up into the John Day River. This area does remain open for hatchery steelhead from January 1st to April 30th, like normal. Next in the northeast zone is a change to the limits on lake trout in Wallowa Lake. In Wallowa Lake, lake trout are an undesirable species and may be impacting the bull trout recovery. There's a fly here that is just...
They've been there all morning. Sorry.
This proposed regulation helps with the conservation need in this area by allowing anglers to harvest more of the lake trout that could be negatively impacting the bull trout. Oh, that's in my ear. Moving along to the southeast zone, there's a couple of things to highlight here. First is a proposal to allow the use of bait. In a section of Crystal Creek. This is one of those inadvertent restrictions. When we changed Crystal Creek to artificial flies and lures only, we inadvertently took away a popular perch fishery. By allowing the use of bait from the downstream of the confluence of Recreation Creek, we're going to be able to bring back that popular perch fishery. The red-bound trout in this area kind of stage and spawn upstream of the locations. There's conservation concern with this change.
Could I ask a quick question before you go on that one? Does it still, we had a reason before not to have the bait because of other fisheries. Are we still able to keep that benefit when we open it back up for bait for perch?
Correct. We're only opening it up downstream of the confluence of Recreation Creek. All of the rest of Crystal Creek upstream, where most of the red-bound trout occur, will remain artificial flies and lures only. Thank you. Again, in the southeast zone, there's a couple of more highlights here. One is the removal of the limit on brown trout in the North Fork Sprague River at an earlier closure date needed in Spencer Creek. In the North Fork Sprague River, removing the limit on brown trout will provide consistency with our zone regulations in this area. And additionally, this change may have a conservation benefit, allowing additional opportunities to harvest brown trout, and then the native fish in this area may be receiving less pressure. In Spencer Creek, this is a need changes because of the removal of the Klamath dams. The Chinook are now showing up to this area for the first time in decades, and they're showing up a little earlier. And so the closure date of September 30th is needed to, it's a conservation need to protect these spawning Chinook that are now returning to this area. Moving on, we have a Snake River update. There's one proposal in the Snake River this year, and that's to remove the size limit on bass. This proposed change will maintain the concurrent regulations with Idaho. This will help with law enforcement and is consistent with the way that we manage these concurrent waters. This area is above Hell's Canyon Dam, it's above Anadromie, and the red band trout presence here is very limited due to poor water quality. So this area is a popular fishery for anglers with a variety of other warm water fish. Next, I want to move to the Columbia River. In the Columbia River, there's quite a few proposals, but really most of them fall into two main categories. The first category is to make the rules more efficient to the public. So there are several current regulations describing salmon and sturgeon seasons that end up being modified each year through temporary rules because the fisheries are managed more with in-season estimates and happen after the publication of these books. So this causes much confusion and inconsistencies by where we have a certain date in the book and then a different date on the website, and it's just not consistent. So by posting these kind of dynamic fisheries that change frequently and annually, we can avoid some of the confusion. And really just provide a better customer service experience overall. So again, these are the dynamic fisheries are getting moved to the website. The static things that happen year after year are printed in this book. The second kind of category change of a lot of the changes that are proposed in the Columbia River is a description of our tributary fisheries. There's several Columbia River tributaries where the open seasons are described as like consistent with the regulations for the Columbia River and then describe a broad area. And so within that broad area, there can be multiple different regulations. So it's difficult to know which one to follow when you're fishing in the tributary. So this update will just better describe which rule to follow when you're fishing in the tributaries by pointing to the area of the Columbia River that's like directly adjacent to that tributary. So for example, Herman Creek right now, the regulation says open consistent with regulations for the Columbia River between I-5 and Bonneville Dam. And so that's a big area. So the proposed change is going to say open consistent with the regulations in the Columbia River directly adjacent to the mouth of Herman Creek, so you know which rule to follow. The last thing I want to highlight here is the ocean endorsement. This is per House Bill 2342, which passed in 2025. An ocean endorsement is required now to fish for any species except shellfish, salmon, and steelhead in ocean waters. This is in addition to and not lieu of any angling licenses and tags that are currently required under our Fish and Wildlife laws. An ocean endorsement is included for free in the resident pioneer, resident disabled veteran, and youth licenses, and will not be required on free fishing weekends. So the cost of the annual endorsement is $9. The cost of the daily endorsement will be $4. And these funds will go towards ODFW coastwide surveys and marine fish research and just allow better management of our marine fisheries. So now I'll pass it over to my colleague here.
Thank you.
For issue number 2. Thank you.
Turn on. I turn on. Okay, I think we're still in the morning. Yes. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Commissioners, and Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Mike Govan, and I'm the Acting West Region Manager. I'm here today to propose an angling opportunity in the Coquille River for hatchery fall Chinook salmon. And if adopted, this will go into effect tomorrow morning. So we had enough time to do this full commission process, and that's over here before you versus going through a temporary rule process, which we often do. Okay, so first I want to orientate a little bit as to what we're going to talk about for the lower Coquille River in this proposal. Specifically on this slide, you'll see those areas that we currently are engaged with our hatchery Chinook harvest augmentation program, and we have 3 release sites that occur in the lower Coquille, one right near down the mouth, right outside the town of Bandon and Ferry Creek, one further a few miles upstream at Rocky Point, and then we do have one location in Lampa Creek, which is a smaller release location that we do in conjunction with the Coquille tribe. The fish that are released here in Ferry Creek, we release about 75,000 smolts. The Rocky Point location, which historically was a location called 7 Mile, we released about 80,000 smolts. And then the full program is about 150,000, so we do some additional releases up there in Lampa Creek. So I wanted to bring this up so that as we kind of talk through the rest of these slides, you'll just have some orientation as to where those locations are. But I did want to give you, before we move too forward, some context about the hatchery programs that currently exist in the Coquille River. We started the harvest augmentation program, which I just described with that previous slide. We started that back in 1983, so it's been going on for a long time, to release smolts in the lower Coquille River to help increase harvest opportunity for anglers to catch hatchery fish. As I just mentioned, these occur in 3 locations, throughout the river, and we've been doing that for a very long time. We have a second program also in the Coquille that the Commission's aware of that started back in 2022, and it's our conservation program. So as you all know, with the illegal introduction of smallmouth bass and the corresponding crash of the wild population of chinook, the Commission approved the department to implement a conservation hatchery program using wild brood stock, which began in 2022 to help supplement the wild fish population. Different from what I just showed you, these releases occur really high up in the basin, about 70 miles upstream from where the other release locations are. And they do not contribute at all to the fishery. They're not adipose clipped, so they're not legal to harvest. We are continuing to assess this program to see how it's coming along. It has been going for a couple of years, and when the Commission approved this program, they wanted its performance to be reviewed along with the scheduled CMP review, which is coming up next year. So I just wanted to make sure that I just kind of set the table a little bit about the 2 different programs, 2 distinct reasons why we have them, and then more details to come sometime next year on the conservation program and how that's performing.
Just one quick follow-up on what you just said, Mike. Are there no instances of catch and release? You said there's no application of, there is catch and release, right, of any wild?
Well, there's
it could happen.
That's Chair Wall, that's correct. There could be incidental catch that occurs. In fact, there in the agenda item summary, we have a little bit of a write-up of that. We've been keeping close track of that for the last couple of years. It's the hatchery fish that are coming back, we're catching them about 2 times the rate of the interception of these wild fish that are there. But when it comes to the catch and release part, they cannot be retained. So there may be some associated hooking mortality with that, but we expect that to be extremely low because of the very few amount of fish that are available in the river. So I'm going to focus now on the harvest program. The challenges within the harvest program are illustrated on this graph, which shows the numbers of adults spawned for this program between 2010 and 2023. In 2018, as with the wild fish in the river, we experienced a dramatic decline in the returns of hatchery fish to the Coquille. In 2019, we implemented a reduced bag limit and subsequently closed the fishery for wild harvest in 2020. In 2021, the harvest fishery also was closed as we had concerns over the ability to meet broodstock needs in the basin. So there's a number of factors that have contributed to these poor hatchery returns, including challenges that we faced at Coal River's hatcheries, which resulted in mortality during the rearing process, loss of the acclimation release sites. Like I had mentioned, 7 Mile, that we had to find some alternative sites. 7 Mile return fish at a very high rate. There are also poor ocean conditions that both the wild fish and the hatchery fish have experienced in this time period. And then also the lack of wild returning fish that we previously had used as part of our brood stock. So multiple factors that contributed to that decline. Okay, good. They did fix that slide. So we have seen improvement, and we've been working really closely with our partners in the basin, including our STEP volunteers, the Coquille STEP program, and our co-manager, the Coquille Indian Tribe. Together, we have taken many actions, such as focusing our hatchery smolt releases for the harvest augmentation low in the basin and Ferry Creek, collecting returning adult fish in Lower Ferry Creek, using nets and traps earlier in the season so we can get an increased broodstock take. We are making progress addressing the infrastructure issues at Coal Rivers. We also have worked to offset predation by seals by installing a seal excluder in 2021. And so as you can see by the graph here, these efforts have resulted in a significant increase in the number of smolts that have been released over the past few years. And due to this increase that occurred in 2022, we anticipate that the number of returning adult Chinook salmon this year will be higher than in previous years and will be available for harvest. It is important to note there are no trapping facilities and no feasible options for collecting these hatchery fish above the Highway 101 bridge that I showed in that first map. So allowing the harvest of these hatchery fall Chinook is the most practical and beneficial use of these fish. And so given the increased returns and the inability to collect fish above the Ferry Creek location, we are proposing to allow for a limited harvest of hatchery Chinook salmon in the Coquille River. This proposal has been developed with department staff and with the Coquille Indian tribe as part of our co-management agreement. And we are proposing to allow the harvest of hatchery Chinook on the Coquille River during the wild coho season, which the commission approved at the last meeting. And this will occur from September 13th to October 15th, so for about a month, from the Highway 101 bridge upstream to Sturgeon Park, which is about a 15-mile fishery. And I want to emphasize for clarity that there will no wild Chinook, harvest of wild Chinook will be prohibited. So that will not be open for wild Chinook. It is open for wild coho. We're going to see hatchery fish being caught. So we're proposing to allow the anglers to take those fish if they catch them. And as we've done in past years, staff will be conducting an e-creel on this site, so we will get a good sense of what's happening and their interactions that are going on with the wild fish that are in the river. And with that, I think both of our presentations are done and we can take any questions.
Thank you. And commissioners, we have two motions that we'll be eventually looking at on this one. So, and we have 5 people who would like to testify. And all of them are virtual. I don't know which of the 2 issues they're going to be testifying on. So we can ask any general questions now, or we can go to the testimony and then come back to questions. Okay, then the 5 people who are signed up, thank you very much, both. And if you'll stay around, because these are all virtual, you don't need to move. James Fraser, then Ethan Smith, Brian McLaughlin, Mike Kennedy, and then Kenny Diker. So James Fraser and Ethan Smith.
What are you doing?
And again, we may not be able to see you, but we can hear, and the slides that if you have them will be up. So go ahead, James.
Thank you, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, members of the commission, and Director Colbert. My name is James Fraser, and I'm the Oregon Policy Director at Trout Unlimited. TU is dedicated to conserving cold water fish, such as trout, salmon, and steelhead in their habitats. We have thousands of members in Oregon. I'd like to provide brief comment regarding Exhibit C, Attachment 3A, which details the draft sport fishing regulation changes that would apply for the next 2 years. We submitted a letter that's in your packet with more detail to accompany these comments. Over the past several months, TU staff met with ODFW biologists regarding the proposed 26-27 angling regulation changes. This included getting TU staff in Klamath Falls together with district bios for that basin, as well as getting TU staff in LeGrand and Baker City together with ODFW staff in Northeast. This was a productive process by which TU staff shared suggestions and rationales to ODFW, and then we all got together to discuss them. Some of the suggestions have moved forward here and others have not. I'm commenting primarily just to note our appreciation for those opportunities to engage with staff and help shape the proposals before you, and to highlight a few changes which we particularly support. Overall, we see a lot of changes and refinements that we'd like to see move forward, especially including those that are intended to conserve unique populations of wild trout and salmon. In short, those include the following, all of which happen to occur in the Southeast region. Number 1, lowering the daily bag limit for trout in Burnt River now that the stream is no longer stocked with hatchery trout. Number 2, lowering the daily bag limit for trout in Eagle Creek on the south side of the Wallowas, which isn't stocked anymore either. Number 3, removing the bag limit on brown trout in the North Fork Sprague River and tributaries. And number 4, in Spencer Creek, where a lot of the first salmon returned after Klamath Dam's removal, shortening trout season to end on September 30th instead of October 31st. That change will continue to allow trout fishing on the stream, but helps ensure returning Chinook salmon aren't disturbed. Lastly, I just wanted to note our support for the statewide change to allow spearfishing for bass and walleye in all streams. I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And I don't see questions, so Ethan Smith. Okay, Brian McLaughlin. Thank you, Michelle.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Brian McLaughlin. I live in Portland, Oregon. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to provide comments today. My comments concern proposal number 63 in the sport fishing regulation proposed changes. This change would be to permanent the rules, and it would presumptively close steelhead retention on the lower Columbia from the I-5 bridge to Bonneville Dam for 3 months that are now presumptively open under permanent rules from August, September, and October. The justification for this proposal is to simplify the permanent rules because in recent years, except for this year, retention of hatchery steelhead has been closed in this area from August to October through October due to concerns about low returns and principally about concerns about impacts to bee-run steelhead. My concern is that by changing the permanent rules in this manner, you're essentially shifting the baseline expectation for recreational opportunity and seasons and presuming that seasons will be closed and essentially setting a new normal. It's essentially incorporating what have been temporary rules into permanent rules and without a robust discussion by the Commission about agency policy concerning management of steelhead on the lower Columbia River. Now, I very much support conservation of steelhead, including the bee-run steelhead. And I've supported these temporary rules in the past. However, after reviewing ODFW data regarding impacts, I simply don't see a material conservation benefit by closing recreational fisheries under Proposal 63. The recreational impacts are very minor, perhaps 4 to 6/10 of 1%, as best I can figure out. And so while I don't see a significant recreational conservation benefit, I do see a substantial negative impact on recreational opportunity, especially by presumptively closing the lower Columbia River during August when there's significant hatchery steelhead going through. Essentially, what I'm asking the Commission to do is have a more robust policy discussion about this proposed change before making a permanent rule change. And I'll just point out that in the last 5 years, the non-treaty sector has used only 35% of its impact allocation under the US v. Oregon agreement. And I'm concerned that if we continue to use very little of our allocation, that may also affect negotiations of the new 10-year agreement, which I believe is something that's maybe occurring right now. I'd love to provide you more context if you have any questions about the total management agreement and how the allocation of impacts are between the non-treaty and treaty sectors. But 2 points I just want to point out real quick before my time is up. One, I'd suggest you also take a look at Proposal 59, because I don't see how that's consistent with Proposal 63. And I'll let you look at that. And then the last thing I would add, if you're going to approve this proposal, I suggest you add something to the rules that say steelhead seasons during August and October are determined on an annual or in-season basis. Visit ODFW's website to let people know that through emergency or temporary rules, these areas may be opened. And I'd also ask that you have the staff provide the criteria that it uses to open or close these seasons. Anyway, thank you very much for considering my comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Mike Kennedy. Is Mike?
Mike is online. Looks
Okay.
like he's trying to get on.
Give it one more minute and. What?
Yeah.
Mike, you're muted.
Think
Mike, if you're talking, you are muted. Can you unmute your microphone?
Is Kenny Diker? He's not. One more chance, Mike, and you're the last person to testify since Kenny is not available. So if you are there. Okay, commissioners, I think we will move forward with questions to staff and Commissioner King.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair Wall. So a couple things. Thank you for, I talked to Sean and I also talked to you, Mike, about really clarifying what we're doing on the Coquille. That really helps a lot to understand the hatchery versus the wild, and that essentially the conservation hatchery, as I'm understanding it, isn't even on the map that you showed us. It's really, really far upstream according to this. So thank you for clarifying that and making sure that's clear. The one question I have about it is, again, you said it can be effective tomorrow when we vote on it. Is this annually, or what are we doing with this? That's what I'm a little bit still murky on.
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, yeah, good question. It is a little bit odd. We're here to talk about the 26, 27 regs, but because the timing, we were able to kind of put this into the packet as a in-season now go live regulation. So this will take place from, if you approve it, from tomorrow until October 15th of 2025, and then it goes away. So it's in essence, like you guys are seeing a temporary rule going as a permanent regulation. So if we, all those, like, however many are approved today, the 15, like we could have, there's not time to bring all those in. There was time to bring this one in.
Okay, so this is a one-off meeting.
It's a one-off, yep.
And so you're still monitoring this closely, because especially looking at that bar graph where it just kind of went to zero there in 2020. I mean, how do we know that that's not happening again? But that's what you're monitoring for.
That's correct.
Okay, so that was what I wanted to be clear about that. But otherwise, it is quite clear the differences. So thank you for that. The rest of it is the other part. So our regs. So I have to tell you, I understand kind of sort of, I remember that I forget. I just think it needs to be a bit more clear when you go to my ODFW and when you don't, because people are out there confused. I get this question all the time, like, where are the salmon regs? Like, because we changed it and we're making it every 2 years except for blank. So maybe that needs to be like on the cover, like more clearly or something, because that message is just not getting through to people. And I'm looking at people around behind you and they're kind of going, yeah. So, I mean, I think that that's not quite there yet. The other thing that I don't think is quite there yet, and that might help with people being less confused about where to go, is language, literally language. We are in a county that is almost 50% Hispanic or Latino or whatever we're calling them at this moment. Do we have communication for them? And, all of the other groups in other parts of the state, like, Vietnamese, Russian, like some of these other languages, and that I think would help with some of these fantastic pictures. I love the pictures. I love the smiles, but I wonder if there's whole segments of the population we don't see and they're smiling because they can't even read the darn things. So where are we with language?
Thank you, Chair Wall, Commissioner King. I can address the language issue. We do provide the opportunity for the Spanish-speaking public to download the regulations in Spanish. That is provided online right now. And then, if you open the cover, there's information there about how to reach out to find any information in some of the other languages as well. So we're not printing everything in all of the different languages. We are trying to allow accommodations for people that don't speak English, and especially the Spanish regulations that are posted online now.
Okay.
So King, can I just add that kind of bigger picture translation services? We are right now going back through an RFP request for contractors to do more real-time translation services. And as you and I have talked, it's something, especially when it's about people being legal, you really got to have your act together. So if we print these regs in paper, in a language, and then we real-time change fishing regs, we're really exposing people to kind of a higher likelihood of being illegal if we don't do the whole thing well.
And in multiple languages, and that's what we're looking at. So, they might pick up a book in Spanish. We got to make sure that my ODFW is actually updating in all of these other languages as well, so they can stay legal through in-season management. And so the short answer is, not only are we doing it in Spanish, but we're actually leaning into being able to do it in more real time for more languages. So
okay, and so when is that? Is it with this update? Is it every 2 years?
No, the Spanish version now, but even better is that we're going to be able to do it in more languages here soon.
Okay, so it's quote soon.
Yeah.
And so it's not available in print in Spanish. It is available online. And I guess when you get the book and you open it, like you can see this is where you go for Spanish language. Is that what's happening right now?
So in the book on page, I can't remember exactly the page it is, but there is information here on page 4 that says, how to reach out to us for help with other languages. When you go to the fishing regulations online, it's I can't remember the website, but the online version of the fishing regulations, there's an English version and then there's a Spanish version, and they're right on top of each other. So, you can see on the page which link to click.
Okay. I just wonder, particularly in like percentage wise, the 3 biggest Spanish speaking counties are east. So this is number 1. Number 2 is Morrow. Number 3, Hood River. And I just wonder if somehow we could, in those counties at least, in our big displays, when you go into whatever, Bi-Mart or Sportsman's or whatever, is there something that can at least prompt people that this is available in another language without just opening it and searching to page 4? Because I think, particularly in those communities, that we are not getting through. They do not know. And if you can't read a book far enough to get to page 4 to figure that out, I still don't think we're quite, I don't think they quite get it. At least for the little bit of overlap that I've had in trying to communicate with those communities, because they're not getting the message, okay, like the fishing reg is different than your boating reg, is different than the thing you need for the trailer. Like it's all a big ball of confusion, I would say. Still, I understand that it's improved and I understand we have some options, but I think it's still a bit murky for folks.
Commissioner King, just really appreciate your comments. And as you know, we're doing a lot, and we can continue to push some of our outreach materials in stores and elsewhere to help people understand where to go in the short term in terms of our Spanish translation. But then again, really leaning into getting it in other languages as well, and trying to get it out into those communities.
Okay. And the thing is, also my final question is the licensing fee that changes. Obviously, they're going up. And is that going to be clearly stated in the book or somewhere to know like what the change in cost is?
Yes, thank you, Chair Wall. Commissioner King, the changes will be displayed again in the book, again on our website. It will be clear how much things cost.
Okay.
Bob. Thank you, Commissioner King, for keeping track of that. Bob Spellbrink, Commissioner Spellbrink, go ahead with your question, and then I have a few.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wall. Okay, first on the on Brian McLachlan's concerns there on the Columbia River steelhead, I guess response from staff on that about did you understand his concerns on that, especially on the problem with the basically recreational fishery on the Columbia River Hatchery steelhead, summer steelhead?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. Commissioner Spellbrink, I did understand what he was asking. I think there might have been a little bit of confusion in our intention. We are not intending to close any fisheries. The fisheries that always are open are going to remain to be open. Things that are seasoned, that are set after the regulation book is published, are those that are adopted through the commission in a separate process. When we publish this printed document, we kind of have to think about what we think the season is going to be. And so we put dates in the books of around when we think it's going to be, when it normally happens. Then when it comes time to adopt that fishery, a lot of times those dates have shifted, and that is what's causing the confusion, is the date that got printed in the book is not what the actual rule is. And so we're proposing to move those dynamic fisheries away from the printed book and point people to the direction of the website to find that information. And so we're not proposing to remove any fisheries by doing this. He pointed out that we need clear communication. In everywhere in the book where there was currently those dates, we are now going to put the words additional salmon steelhead seasons are determined on an annual basis. Visit myodfw.com for regulations. And so that will be repeated in the sections where we are moving things from the book to the website, and that's the intention there. And lastly, I did want to address the question. He pointed out specifically 2 items in the PDF document that describes each, pointed out number 63 and number 59, and there is a consistency there. I do notice there is a wrong date there. So if we can get it into the record, this on proposal number 59, the proposed regulation was open for steelhead August 1st through December 31st. That was a typo, and that should read November 1st through December 31st to be consistent with on number 63, like he pointed out.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like we kind of addressed that then. Then the next comment I had was on the coquille fishery proposed for this fall. And I thought I'd just maybe make a note here of some success. You know, we don't see a lot of success stories with Chinook populations in the Coquille Basin these days. So I thought it might be good to, you know, I think this was in response to Commissioner/Dr. King's question to me about it was confusing. You know, there was so many different hatchery programs in the Coquille, and the one being the conservation hatchery. And so far, you know, we hadn't seen much response from. But anyway, in the process of my asking questions around stuff, I'll just relay some information here that really shows how much of a success story that Lower River hatchery program has been. And feel free to correct me if Mike, if some of this information is wrong, but I wrote it down when I talked to the expert back a while. In 2020, there was only 3 pair of Chinook captured in Ferry Creek. The existing ODF&W trap was not working very good. And anyway, in 2020, there was only 3 pairs of Chinooks that were captured for the hatchery program. In 2021, there were 24 pairs trapped. And this was with the help of volunteers, and they netted some supplementary. Anyway, and the trap itself still wasn't working very well. In 2022, and this is where I think, you know, we need to give credit where credit's due, with a grant from the Port of Bandon and Bandon Dunes Golf Course. I think it was $35,000 or $40,000 they got from a grant. They hired a contractor, and with volunteers basically built and installed a new trap in Ferry Creek. And that year, 2022, they got 155 pairs collected in the new trap for the hatchery program there. So it shows you. And in 2023, the next year, they actually captured 250 pairs of Chinook in the new trap. So you can see the trajectory. That's where that hatchery program in the Lower River and Ferry Creek is headed. And I think you're seeing an example of performance from that. Now, you know, we're proposing a fishery, which I think is a great idea for that Lower River to take advantage of that increased hatchery production in the Lower River coming from that Ferry Creek hatchery, which is, you know, a lot of it that was done with volunteers and grant money.
Thank you, Commissioner Spilbrink. Commissioner Lebhart.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I'll be quick. So 76 proposed changes, 27 simplification, 26 housekeeping now, with the change in that one date. New angling regulations, 11, and conservation need 10, corrections and invert restrictions 6, and a climate change 1. So when I first started reading through that, I'm thinking, oh, wow, we're going to get a lot of input. And so I'm assuming, hopefully positively, that because of the homework that you did with the various groups, I was amazed how few letters we got, except for the get out to vote on spearfishing. I couldn't believe all the letters and emails. Spearfishing is, so, but anyway, and you addressed it. So, but, here's James Fraser from Trout Unlimited saying, I support this, I support this. Northwest Fishing Association, I support this, I support this. That tells me a lot, because I always look at that to see what kind of negative input we're getting, if we're getting a whole bunch of input into this, and there's not. So I'm going to credit staff, I think, for all the good work you did in addressing some of these questions and concerns about this. Now, I realize a lot of this is housekeeping, but I think you guys did a great job. And the coquille, whatever, however you want to pronounce it, I think I agree with Bob, I think there's an opportunity here. It's a hatchery program. It's been a success. We need to acknowledge that. And thank you for the support on that. So I'm going to be voting yes. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a few questions, but I would like to start with one appreciation in the updates that you did. The continuing work the department's done on refugia and looking at those and looking at flow and temperature so that we begin to look at what would need to drive any closures or any changes in the fishing. So the one that recognizes the refugia that you put into the chain, it's great that we pulled that one in. I appreciate the clarity and consistency. The fishers trying to work through this will be well served by I think you're right, Commissioner Laphart. That's why we saw so few objections to these. I have a general question about several of the changes, including like the Willamette one. They say that the justification is this change will benefit. We're going to change the season on this population and it will benefit these two or this one population. Will you make that connection? What's the benefit to those other populations?
Sure. Thanks, Chair Wall, for that question. And I appreciate what everybody said about staff. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the staff that worked on all of these is all outside of here. All of our district biologists, to make sure that credit is spread out all across the state.
Good point.
So thank you for that question, Chair Wall. A conservation benefit can come in a kind of a variety of different ways. So for example, the Willamette, we are setting the season from October to December. So in October, so the chinook are coming up, and most of them are spawning before October 1st, and so we're setting the season to start October 1st to protect the chinook. We're closing the season at the end of December because at that time most of the coho have moved through and the steelhead are not yet in the system. So by setting that boundary, we're providing a conservation benefit for the fish that are using that area outside of those dates. Other areas like, Wallowa Lake, we said there's a conservation benefit there by removing the limits on the lake trout there. And so there's a direct competition between lake trout and bull trout there. So by allowing an opportunity to harvest more of the lake trout, that is reducing the pressure on some of the local bull trout there. So, by allowing one regulation here, we're providing another conservation benefit there. So it kind of depends on, the regulation that we're doing, if it's a regulation specifically on a fish to protect that fish or versus another fish to protect a different fish. So there's a variety of conservation benefits that can be realized from either the dates of a season or, allowing additional harvest on certain species.
And one other detail along those lines, in Odell Creek, we made a change, and that's for bull trout again. So how does this? It's catch and release bull trout. So how does that one help? Or did I?
Yeah. So
the wording language or the wording change was so small, but what's the help?
Yeah. So Thank you again for that question, Chair Wall. It was maybe another inadvertent restriction where we had the rule that says, that said catch and release or something, including bull trout, and we didn't intend for it there is no fishery on bull trout.
Okay.
So it was kind of a housekeeping change to remove those words to make it clear that there is not a bull trout fishery there.
Okay. Thank you. That helps. That is sort of it on the changes, and I haven't heard questions on the endorsement. I do want to make a couple comments on the Coquille one, and I do recognize on this one the value of having opportunity. I look at this one a little differently, and I just want to mention my concern about this one, because I'm looking at our Coquille fall chinook abundance and for the wild population, and we have been below critical abundance for several years. And we put the conservation hatchery in place because we knew this was a population struggling deeply, and we've had really low returns on those. And so as much as it's great to put the opportunity in place for the hatchery fish that are succeeding, they are seeming to make a change, it concerns me that we would, with our wild population below critical abundance since like 2018 or so, that we would, and trying as much as we can with a conservation hatchery for a last ditch effort to hang on to that wild population, it would concern me if we put any more risk on that wild population. So it concerns me that we would open that one back up. And if you have comments, that's great. I just want people to know that that's what I'm thinking on it. With that, I don't see other questions. So
Bob's the current one. I can't.
Bob, was your hand up from before or now?
Thank you, Chair Wall. I re-raised it because, and I just wanted to clarify also, the fish from the conservation hatchery program upriver are, and I think anyway, let me know if I'm wrong on this, but I understand those fish are not fin clips, so the upriver hatchery conservation fish would not be retained in the sport fishery proposed. Is that right?
Thank you for the clarification. I did understand that the risk is bycatch, but we have so few was my concern about that population, that wild population. It's very far below critical abundance, so for several years. And I think that's a risk that we need to at least be aware of. So I just wanted to mention that and my concern about that fishery. So now we're at the point where we need to decide what we're going to do, and we have the regulations, including the endorsement. So is someone ready to make a motion? Commissioner Dallas.
Commissioner Laphart has the corrected one from council.
Oh,
okay. I'm going to do just issue one. This is the first one. I move to amend the sport fishing regulations as proposed by staff in attachment 3A, and in addition, as proposed by staff in attachment 4, except with the respect to proposal number 59, that date of August 1st is changed to November 1st. I also authorize staff to update the necessary calendar dates and make them the changes, the matting changes to correct spelling and grammar errors and to address inadvertent inconsistencies to improve readability.
Second.
Another.
So it has been moved and seconded to amend OAR chapter. What am I doing? Yeah, 635.
This is November.
But I don't.
Just do an issue one.
Corrected.
Not the goal.
It's been moved and seconded to amend the sport fishery regulations as proposed by staff, as was just read into the record. And we will, on this issue, on this motion, do a roll call, please.
Spellbrink.
Yes.
Labhart.
Yes.
Hall DeFreeze.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Hatfield Hyde.
Yes.
Wall.
Yes. And now can we move, so it's unanimous. Can we move to issue 2? Is someone ready to make a motion on that one?
I can make a motion. I move to adopt the staff recommendations to allow for harvest opportunity for hatchery, chinook, salmon, and the Coquille River as proposed by staff in attachment 3B.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the staff recommendations to allow for harvest opportunity for hatchery chinook salmon in the Coquille River, as was just read into the record. May we also do a roll call on this one, please?
Labhart,
Yes.
Hall DeFreeze,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Spellbrink,
Yes.
Hatfield Hyde,
Yes.
Wall.
No. So that one carries, and thank you very much for a remarkable job on a huge project. So thank you, and we will take a lunch break then and come back for items D, E, and F. And can we do it in 45 minutes?
Are we spearfishing our lunch?